Chapter 641. Mermans, Please. Princess Serena looked up, seeing a familiar golden-haired boy floating in the air. "Michael!" she screamed out. She waved her handcuffed hands in the air, trying to get his attention. "He can't see or hear you, Princess. He must be talking to someone else," the merman next to her said. It was weird that the humans seemed to be looking directly at them, but that wasn't possible. It must have been a coincidence. The merman began escorting Serena out further into the sea, with the water level increasing with every step. It won't be long before their entire bodies were submerged in water, changing their physiology and allowing them to gain absolute speed and maneuverability in the ocean. No human would be able to catch up to them then. "Hello? I'm talking to you." Michael quickly dove down, his direction as clear as day. He was coming after them. The old mermaid and the rest of the mermen surrounding Serena were utterly surprised. The human boy was coming directly at them. The old mermaid's powers should have shielded them from sight, invisible to the human naked eye. Yet this boy was looking at them as if he could see through the water. Michael reached the boundary of the water dome surrounding the merman and was forced to stop in his tracks. The old mermaid heaved a sigh of relief. Her water powers were as tough as the corals and metals in the deepest depths of the ocean. The human boy would be hard-pressed to break through it fast enough before they could escape. She waved her hand, changing the properties of the water dome. It had retained its tough outer shell, but now light and sound can both pass through it. "Who are you, and what do you need from a princess of Atlantis?" the old mermaid asked, suspicious. "Don't you know that you could cause a global crisis by doing this?" Michael looked at Serena and saw the desperate look in her eyes. "Doesn't seem like she wants to go with you, and if she's a princess, doesn't that mean that you should be following what she wants? What if this is a kidnapping?" The old mermaid didn't answer his question and just eyed him curiously. "How were you able to see through my powers?" He shrugged. "I just can." Of course, he wasn't going to tell her that with his drone vision. He could see the water dome from a mile away. It was practically like a glowing sun in the middle of the water. In order to not create any more misunderstandings, Serena intervened. "This is Michael Vanderbilt. He's currently hailed as the most talented of the young generation in Metropolis. You know Alaric and Potbowl, right? He was able to triumph against them in a game." The old mermaid showed a hint of amazement and surprise. As part of her job, she was familiar with all of the strongest humans in the royal continent, the heavenly knights and their prodigies as well as the mystic masters and their geniuses. So, she knew just how strong Alaric and Potbowl were in terms of human strength. But she had never heard anything about this boy. That seems highly improbable. They're at the peak of their cultivation realm, while he seems to be barely at the middle. "It's true, mistress. We have witnessed it ourselves," said Serena's attendants. "And Alaric wasn't at the peak of his cultivation. He had transcended it. He reached the nascent spirit realm," Serena clarified. And this time, even the other mermen couldn't keep their composure. Nascent spirit. A human as young as Alaric reached that realm? The humans have gained another strong fighter. Their reaction to this was very telling of how the mermen perceived magnetic cultivation. After all, they were all taught to never engage with a human who had reached the nascent spirit realm at all costs, no matter what. One could say that mermen were stronger than humans. But that would change once they were in the nascent spirit realm. "You're all reacting to this wrong. This human boy was able to beat Alaric in a game while he's in the nascent spirit realm." However, the old mermaid was still doubtful. It sounded too fantastical to be true. "Princess Serena, I want to speak with you face to face," Michael shouted from the skies. And without warning, he reached down and took out his Unity Saber switch from his pockets, manifesting one of the most powerful weapons in his hands. He swung his saber, with its Unity particles incinerating the water particles into a pure mist. A laceration appeared on its surface, causing the entire water dome to pop like a balloon. "What?" the other merman gasped. The old mermaid watching this down below was stunned into silence as she saw her own power get turned into vapor that rained down on them. "Yeah, go Michael," Serena celebrated. Michael floated down into the water with the absolute unity defense, kicking in and creating a protective layer from the water and preventing him from getting wet. The old mermaid gazed at Michael as she was starting to understand that there may be a hint of truth about what Serena was saying. Her water dome shouldn't have been destroyed like that so easily. Perhaps the most surprising part was that this powerful kid wasn't a part of the strongest human organizations. It was only through his pure talent. Michael, the Duchess said that you know where the Pixie Queen resides, right? Serena asked, eager to prove herself. He nodded. That's why I'm here. Can you prove this? The old mermaid asked. I can suspend disbelief about your strength, but I cannot take your words about the Pixie Queen at face value. This is important to the entirety of the merman race, as well as the beast folk in general. He nodded. Sure. Give me a sec. He looked down at his shadow and whispered something to lure Vivi out of their headquarters. It was easy, of course. All he had to say was that he was promising a bunch of surprised emotions ready to be eaten. It wasn't long before the shadow underneath his feet morphed into a dome and dispersed just a second after, revealing the glowing figure of Vivi in front of the merman. The so-called Pixie Queen stretched out her hands and buzzed around in the air, with pixie dust falling behind her wake. You better keep your promise, Mr. Reborn, Vivi said to him. Yeah. Just then, Vivi quickly turned her head around and looked at the merman in front of her. Oh, such a bountiful surprise. I could just eat their emotions up. The mermen, upon seeing Vivi right in front of them, couldn't help but gawk at her with their jaws wide open. Some of them even subconsciously opened the gills on their necks to exhibit their surprise. Even Serena was surprised, not expecting Michael to simply teleport a fairy right in front of him within a few moments. Look, I know it's hard to believe, but she is not an ordinary fairy, he said, pleading his case. She's actually the Pixie Queen, the old mermaid shouted, diving down deep in the water and performing an underwater bow of respect. Chapter 642. Great Pixie Queen. All the mermen prostrated themselves in the water, showing their utmost respect towards the small and mischievous fairy floating above them. What? How come they recognized you almost immediately? He complained. It was hard for him to believe that they could distinguish her as the Pixie Queen despite her attitude and decorum not being regal in any way, shape, or form. I told you, Mr. Reborn. I'm the real deal, Vivi bragged, swiping her nose. The old mermaid surfaced out of the water, keeping her head low and refusing to make eye contact as she spoke to Vivi. It is with great honor that we are in the presence of a supreme being. The other mermen around her copied her words verbatim. It's nice to meet Cha too, she said, furiously slapping the water and creating chaotic ripples on the surface. The mermen immediately felt a rush of excitement as Vivi performed one of their cultural greetings. The social convention was to perform just a single gentle tap on the water. Doing more like Vivi would actually be considered rude, but the fact that a supreme being greeted them in the first place was amazing enough. We are at your mercy, O supreme being. Their demeanor towards Vivi was one of absolute compliance. She only needed to say a word, and they would do whatever she asked of them without question. Cool, Vivi said, excited at the power in her hands. Can you guys scream like a dolphin? Oh, can you blow water out of your gills like a whale? Wait, I heard that merman's hair is made out of seaweed. Can I try? Vivi went all out in her requests, saying anything that came to her mind. And surprisingly enough, the mermen followed her words to the T without any questions. First, they opened their mouths and created a screeching sound similar to that of dolphins. Then, they submerged themselves in the sea, opening up their gills and inhaling all the water they could before resurfacing and spewing it out of the gills. The strangest part was that these mermen didn't look like they were embarrassed at all. They actually looked proud. Even the old mermaid was unabashed as she performed these parlor tricks for Vivi. She felt honored that the Pixie Queen would request her performance. And as for Vivi's final request, the mermen grabbed a hold of their hair and began yanking them out of their heads. Wait, are their hairs really made out of seaweed? No. Vivi simply heard this rumor from an unsourced book found on the streets. Would you like a summary of its contents? Knowing that this may have gotten too far, he knew he had to intervene. Vivi, that's enough. Their hairs are not made out of seaweed. And as soon as he said that, the merman looked at him with shock and horror. That's the pixie queen. Yet, this human boy was commanding her with authority as if she was a human child instead. The mermen were offended by the pixie queen. They wanted to reprimand Michael for his rudeness. Supreme beings were supposed to be treated with respect and honor. Human Michael, you must know that you simply cannot talk to the pixie queen like this, the old mermaid said in a stern voice. To rectify your mistake, it is better if you join us in our praise. And before she could even finish her sentence, Vivi flew to Michael and landed on his shoulders. Sorry I got carried away. You'll still allow me to eat emotions, right? He nodded. Fine, but only a little bit, okay? Yes. Vivi stayed on his shoulders, snuggling herself on his clavicle as if it was her own personal couch. The mermen were absolutely speechless. They didn't know how to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The pixie queen was following the orders of a human boy. It was as if she was the lowly creature, while he was the supreme being. Their roles were completely reversed. How? Even Serena was flabbergasted. The Duchess only told her that Michael knew the location of the pixie queen. She took that to mean as if he was a subservient or friendly to her and the fairies. But from what she saw, it seemed as if the pixie queen was subservient to him. Pixie queen, the old mermaid forcefully muttered out. Forgive my rudeness, but why are you obedient to the human boy? Vivi sat on Michael's shoulders. Oh, it's because me and all the fairies are part of his nation. We're Rebornians, she said proudly. There was almost a minute of silence as the mermen digested the information they just learned. The fairies were Rebornanes? The pixie queen too. The mermen didn't even know how to react because this has never happened before in the history of the world. No supreme being has ever turned over their entire species to another nation, and a human one at that. And the pixie queen didn't even choose the most powerful nation. She didn't choose the richest either. She chose a nation ruled by a 13-year-old human boy. This was beyond comprehension. It borderlined insanity. How? Why? The old mermaid asked, struggling to understand it. Vivi thought, closing her eyes. It's because I like Mr. Reborn. I like the Dragonborns. I like Mr. Forgetful. I like the Shadow Pigs. I like everything about it. Of course, the mermen still didn't understand anything. Even if they were humans who grew up in the royal continent, they still wouldn't get it. People had to experience the nation of Reborn for themselves in order for them to get it. The old mermaid kept her head bowed down before she eventually got the courage to look up at Michael and beg for his help. Please help us, she said. Sir Michael, great pixie queen, please lend us your strengths for our surface world endeavors. Serena followed suit. We need the fairies' help. We need to overcome our hurdles. As soon as she said that, Vivi stood straight up, remembering something. Ah, so that's why. Still clueless, he asked her for some clarification. It's been so long since I've met a beast folk that I completely forgot about it. It's probably because I've only been seeing demi-humans for the longest time, Vivi said, clicking her tongue. Beast folk? Aren't they the same as demi-humans? He asked her. Serena shook her head and explained. By the most simplest of definitions, demi-humans and beast folks are the same. They are people whose traits are shared with animals and monsters. However, there is one key difference between the two. Beast folks are under the dominion of a supreme being like our very own Ocean King, or the Draconic Queen, or the Celestial Elf. And being under their dominion, us beast folks are privileged to share in their power and strength, giving us abilities beyond what a normal demi-human could achieve. This was the first he'd ever heard of this. He only knew that those supreme beings ruled a large population of demi-humans. But he never knew that the beast folks under them had different powers. So, all beast folk are demi-humans, but not all demi-humans are beast folks. And somehow, the power that these beast folks have has something to do with ability power. Chapter 643, Beast Folk. Somehow, because of their connection to a supreme being, beast folks had an inherent power that allowed them to use something similar to ability. He verified that they didn't have God-forged pieces because he didn't see their hearts glowing with AP like the other magnetics he had seen. What kind of power do you have? Is it something given to you by your Ocean King? He asked, probing them for more information. Only those who are lucky enough to be born with the Supreme Being's blessing will be able to access this power. Sadly, it cannot be learned or given to others. Princess Serena answered. Our lineages are blessed by our Supreme Being, allowing us to access a power that can change reality itself. For us mermen, we are able to change the reality of water. The effect is different individually, but it is all connected to water in some way. This gave him a little bit more insight as to how beast folks worked in general. It seemed that unlike magnetics, whose abilities ranged from anything to everything, mermen were limited to only changing the reality of water. He guessed that it probably had something to do with the fact that their power derived from the Ocean King himself. How does that relate to fairies? Why would you need their help? The old mermaid pointed to her chest. Our cultivations are based on what we call the Tao heart, and it is in our minds, our souls, and our very being. The stronger our Tao heart, the stronger our connection to the Supreme Being, allowing us to summon a much greater power within us. And the way to strengthen our Tao heart is if we experience great emotional turmoil. Anger, heartbreak, and fear are the ones that are proven to give the greatest results. Princess Serena had told you that only the blessed obtains the power of the Supreme Being. But it is also a curse for all mermen. Those that are not blessed still need to strengthen their Tao heart or risk their health in the process. It is unfortunate, but we have experienced stagnation in our own homes. As we grow older and older, it becomes a lot harder for us to bring out our emotions for us to properly cultivate. And without proper exercise for our Tao hearts, our bodies grow weaker, which in turn make it even harder to strengthen our Tao hearts. It becomes a cycle and drastically lowers our lifespan. And that is the main reason why we have ventured out of Atlantis. We wanted to experience new things and stimulate our Tao hearts with unseen scenery. That's why we need the help of the fairies. They are the only ones that know how to properly bring up emotions within us beast folks. They see emotion much more clearly than others. They can teach us how to properly invoke them for ourselves. Her speech was laden with passion and genuineness. She was truly hoping that they could find some way to help their fellow mermen. The number of blessed and unblessed mermen shrinks each and every day. If we don't remedy this, Princess Serena's words trailed off as the thought of it almost made her tear up. Michael felt sorry for them. Although they were given strength, it seemed that their gift was laden with a poison that was slowly killing their bodies. Are all beast folks like this? He asked them. Yes, this is a problem that plagues all of us. But some species have solved it better than others. Us mermen can be considered the worst at it, the old mermaid admitted. Just like a normal human's heart or muscles, if beast folks don't exercise their Tao heart, then they'd atrophy. Other species have cultures built on fighting, dueling, and other physically intensive training to keep their Tao heart steady. But us mermen don't have that. So please, Pixie Queen, I beg of you to please find a way to keep surviving. Princess Serena bowed her head, and so did the rest of the mermen around her. It finally made sense as to why they treated Vivi like a sacred being. After all, she could be the one to save their species from eventual extinction. You need to experience emotion to strengthen your Tao hearts? Can it be any emotion? He asked them. As long as it stimulates our souls, then our Tao hearts will be well fed, the old mermaid answered. Michael put his head down in deep thought. An idea was already brewing inside his head. This was not the first time he encountered this problem. Back when he first met Vivi and the fairies, they were mischievous creatures who did whatever they could to feed on the fear and emotions of the humans around them. He couldn't blame them. They needed to survive as well. That's why the fairies need emotion, he realized. Vivi was the pixie queen, so this meant that the fairies under her were also classified as beast folks. They had Tao hearts that slowly atrophied without proper stimulation, and unlike the mermen, the fairies chose to get their nutrition, emotion, from the humans around them. And thankfully, he already invented a solution for that. The roller coaster. It was practically a factory that produced strong emotions from its riders. Fear, excitement, trepidation. All of those were being made by the humans and immediately gobbled up by the fairies around them. It was a win-win situation. But if the mermen were the ones to ride the roller coaster, then they could benefit from their own emotions and properly stimulate their Tao hearts. Will you please help us, Pixie Queen? Serena pleaded. Vivi pursed her lips and swung her legs as she sat on his shoulders. Fine. But I have no idea how I'm going to help you guys. All I know is how to eat emotion. Any help would be fine, she replied. Michael then interjected. What about the roller coaster? Vivi's eyes widened in realization before she slapped her own forehead. Duh! I completely forgot about the roller coaster. Serena and the other mermen looked at each other, confused. Wooler boaster. Vivi buzzed towards them, getting up in each of their faces with an excited look on her face. Oh, you should see the roller coaster. It's this big thing that goes WS. Then, tick, 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 wang. She mimicked a ride with the roller coaster, raising her hands with a XD face and sliding down an invisible railing drop before looping back up. Despite her clear explanation, the mermen were still clueless. It's the main reason why we became a Rebornian in the first place, Vivi exclaimed. Michael found a way to feed us emotion on a daily basis. We fairies are no longer hungry. Serena and the old mermaid looked at each other. Their eyes met, and both of them knew that they might have just stumbled upon the answer to their problem. They didn't know what Vivi was talking about, but the fact that fairies were feeding on lots of emotion meant that they could possibly invoke that within themselves as well. Can you please tell us more about this roller coaster? Serena asked, excitement bubbling up to her face. Why don't you go see it for yourself? He asked them. Chapter 644. Emotions running high. Really? Serena exclaimed. We would love to take you up on your offer, Sir Michael, said the old mermaid. Her demeanor had completely changed compared to when she first met Michael. After all, he wasn't just a normal human boy to them now. He was the person who brought them face to face with a supreme being and could possibly be the one to solve their Tao heart problem. Attendants, please prepare the horse carriage, she said. Sir Michael, please lead the way. He immediately raised his hand and stopped them. There's no need for that. The journey would be too long if we just used a horse-drawn carriage. Even an automobile would be too slow. Serena was confused. But Metropolis is only a day's cycle away from here. We're not going to Metropolis. We're going much further away into the King's region and into the parched lands. Both Serena and the old mermaid were familiar with the map of the royal continent. They had heard of the parched lands, but they didn't give it any importance because it was too far, and it was said that the whole place was completely desolate, with only a few demi-humans still struggling to survive. He saw their concern and immediately eased their worries. It's fine. We'll teleport there. Just gather in a small circle so that it'll be easier to transport all of us. The shadow underneath his feet expanded outwards, covering the shallow waters. The merman looked around them, amazed and confused as to what was happening. As he activated his shadow transport spell, the mana in the air significantly decreased, so much so that even the merman took notice of it. He controls this much mana? The old mermaid gasped. A second later, the shadow engulfed them all in a dome, completely covering their surroundings into darkness. They could see nothing but a black void in front of them. Then, the shadow dispersed, retreating back into Michael's shadow. The mermen looked around them and were shocked at the sudden change in scenery. There was no longer a vast ocean behind them, nor a muddy shore in front of them. All they could see was an endless expanse of dry, hot sand that seemed to go through all horizons. Where are we? Serena asked. We're in the parched lands. The nation of Reborn, to be exact. The other mermen gasped in disbelief. It was hard to fathom that they traveled such a long distance in such a short amount of time. They blinked and suddenly, they were at the edge of the royal continent and away from the seas. It's true, the old mermaid muttered. As a mermaid, She had a keen sense of all the water that she has touched or seen in recent memory. It was like a harmless pin was pricking her skin, giving her the water's location. And right now, she felt absolutely nothing. She was trying to sense the water she had just touched only a few moments ago, but she couldn't find it anywhere. The only explanation was that they really did travel all the way to the king's region, no matter how absurd that sounded. "Welcome to the nation of Reborn," he said to them. "Well, not exactly, I guess. This is just where I built the roller coaster." While the mermen were getting their bearings, they suddenly heard the sounds of metal clanking in the near distance. Then a scream. "Kaya!" The mermen immediately went into a defensive stance, thinking that there was danger around them. "Yeehee! Food!" Vivi beamed, immediately making her way towards the roller coaster. Once they realized that there was no danger, the mermen finally saw the giant metal structure in front of them. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen before. It looked like the metallic bones of an ancient monstrous creature. "Come on, guys. You should see this," Vivi urged, pushing Serena and the others forward. The merman group eventually walked closer to the roller coaster. They looked up and saw humans riding on metal boxes, screaming and shouting as it sped through the tracks, going up and down in a loop. "Those humans," the old mermaid muttered in wonder. "I know the looks on their faces. They're both scared and excited." Those expressions were what all mermen dreamed about. They yearned to feel that way. After all, it had been proven that that kind of emotion created the best strengthening of a Tao heart. Unfortunately, this kind of emotion only happens about once in 10 years or even more. Those that were able to experience this were extremely lucky, and considered to have been graced by the Ocean King himself. Yet now there were tens of humans all experiencing the same emotion at the same time. She couldn't believe it. The ride came to a stop, and the humans were escorted out of their seats, only to be replaced by new ones who had waited in line. And just like the first group, these humans also exhibited the same emotion while they tumbled around in the air. She then looked at the gates and saw a large line of people patiently and excitedly waiting for their turn on the roller coaster. And surprisingly, they were also exhibiting excitement and fear even if they weren't on the ride yet. Serena and the old mermaid both came to a realization that this was not a coincidence. This was intentional. This was what a roller coaster was made for. "What do you think?" he asked them. "This is what we wanted," Serena exclaimed, rushing towards Michael and twirled as she ran around him. ChatJK5 explained to him that this was a merman's way of expressing their thanks. It was their equivalent of a hug. "Sir Michael, if the roller coaster can evoke this emotion on humans, then it can certainly do it to mermen as well. You may have solved the greatest problem that we, as a species, have ever faced." The old mermaid sank to the floor, bowing down to him. The other mermen followed suit, making Michael feel awkward. "There's no need to thank me yet. I'm not sure that this roller coaster will be fit for mermen. He built this with humans and other demi-humans in mind, which meant that the thrill factor was directed towards them, not mermen. And as far as he could tell, merman culture and physiology was completely different to humans. What he thinks to be scary may not necessarily translate to mermen. For example, maybe they weren't afraid of heights. After all, they were used to swimming to deep depths, which is quite similar to falling from a great height. But of course, the solution to this was simple. He just had to build a new roller coaster designed specifically for mermen. This would be another huge undertaking, but it was very much worth it. The look of joy and relief on Serena and the other mermen's face made it worth it. They were celebrating while wiping their tears, making him feel quite emotional for them as well. Helping other people become comfortable was his motto in life, and this would be the perfect thing to do that. And of course, he'd be lying if he said that he was doing this out of the goodness of his own heart. He was also thinking about money, sand dollars in particular. Chapter 645. Evoking merman emotions. The more he thought about it, the more he immediately wanted to start preparing for its construction. It seemed like the Tao heart was a problem for all mermen, which meant that his target market numbered in the millions or possibly even billions. And if he priced a ticket for the roller coasters at just one measly sand dollar, Then he would only need 1,000 mermen to purchase a ticket every day to get $10,000 in 10 days. And it was even possible that those mermen would ride the roller coaster multiple times a day, and he'd be able to get to his goal a lot sooner. But of course, he needed to attract 1,000 customers first for him to achieve that. First, he had the mermen get on the roller coaster ride just to see if the ride would work on them at all. If it did, then he wouldn't even need to construct a new ride. "You guys should have a go at it," he advised. Serena and the other mermen seemed more than happy to try out the roller coaster. The mere prospect of having their Tao heart already gave them excitement and a little bit of fear. He used his authority and moved the mermen to the front of the line. Of course, the people who were cut off complained, but he solved that by giving them a coupon that gave them a free ride. "Please leave all your belongings in the locker," said the Rebornian ride attendant. Serena and the old mermaid had to put their very valuable pearl necklace in the locket just like everybody else before they could board the ride. They cautiously entered the seats, their eyes filled with curiosity and a little bit of apprehension. Now that they were actually here, they felt a little bit nervous after seeing the grandiosity of the whole roller coaster. The attendant pushed the locking bar against their chest, securing them to their seat. A few seconds later, the pistons released gas and gave off a pssh sound before the ride started to move. The roller coaster train slowly got up to a decent height before making a near 90-degree drop that accelerated their speed tremendously. It usually wasn't this fast, but he had the engineers change up the speed so that he could see if it stimulated the merman's Tao hearts. A few minutes later, the ride came to a stop and the locking bar let loose, allowing them to board off. "How was it?" he asked them. The old mermaid looked at Michael and immediately prostrated on the floor. "My Tao heart hasn't moved this much in 20 years, she said. "Thank you, and I apologize for my rudeness when we first met. I should have introduced myself earlier. My name is Moirana, and I am Princess Serena's caretaker." "It's fine. It's nice to meet you, Moirana," he said to her. "That was very exciting, Michael," praised Serena. "I never knew that there could be something this wonderful in the surface world." The other mermen had the same positive reaction to the roller coaster, which should be a good thing. But Michael wasn't satisfied. He turned to Vivi and asked what she saw during the ride. "They were excited FO show, but it's not as much as the humans. Like, if humans' emotions peaked at 100%, then the mermen only reached 40%. For the mermen, this seemed to be enough. After all, even just exhibiting 20% of their emotion would have been so much better than they could have achieved back in Metropolis. To create a merman-themed roller coaster, I need to find out what they fear. That was very important. He wanted to get their emotions rolling at 100% capacity. Thankfully, they had a lot of mermen here that he could ask. "Do you guys have any fear? Something that makes your heart palpitate?" The mermen looked at each other and eventually looked at the Moirana. "The ancient deep-sea monsters of Atlantis like the Cthulhu, the Kraken, and the Leviathan are the ones that breed fear in any merman," she answered. He was quite surprised by that answer. He thought they'd be desensitized of fear for the ocean monsters because they resided in Atlantis. But it was probably the fact that they intimately knew about these monsters that they feared them so much. "Well, I can't bring Cthulhu all the way over here. I'd get turned into filet if I forced that ancient monster to become a mascot for the roller coaster. How about things in the surface world? Anything you dislike?" They had no answer. They haven't been in the royal continent for long, and there were also no documented weaknesses of the mermen. They didn't even fear dehydration because their powers allowed them to extract water from the air and all around them. Well, maybe they just don't know what they're afraid of yet. He quickly summoned Shiina and had her prepare a variety of things that could possibly evoke fear from the mermen. He tried all kinds of plants, rocks, metals, and anything else that he could think of. Vivi was right there beside him, monitoring the mermen's emotions for any reaction. It took them about 4 hours and 1,000 samples before they finally got something. Serena and the other mermen's eyes grew wide as they stared upon a stone in the middle of a table. This rock looked normal, but if one looked at it closely enough, they'd be able to see a skeletal outline of something that was fossilized directly in the stone. It was a cephalopod creature with a coiled shell, which Michael recognized to be an ammonite. "Amazing!" Serena gushed. It's our ancestor. You can still see the spirals on its shell. It is with great honor to stand here and bear witness to our predecessor. There was reverence in their gaze. Even though this was just an ammonite, they treated it as if it was a holy object that they should cherish. What's so special about this fossil? He asked them. Did you know that all life in this world was born in the seas? Back in the very birth of our planet, there was just but an empty, endless sea of nothingness. And thanks to the sea god, he bestowed life upon our world with a single whisper. We believe that mermen, humans, demi-humans, and beast folks are all connected in some way, being a descendant of the sea god's whisper. This creature, and all other sons and daughters of the sea that have already left the plane of existence, are considered sacred, for they have sacrificed their lives in order to make us alive. And the more ancient the creature, the more awed we are of its remnants. They could have possibly witnessed the birth of the sea and even life as we know it. As Moirana expressed her admiration and reverence for the fossil, Vivi suddenly saw an explosion of wondrous emotion coming from Moirana. The strength of her emotion rivaled even that of the humans experiencing the roller coaster for the first time. It reached a 100% peak. Michael! Michael! Vivi said, quickly telling him of her discovery. Chapter 646. Fossil Love. As it turned out, Merman's love and adoration for ancient creatures were so strong that it could evoke a tremendous burst of emotion inside them. This was extremely good news. He finally found a way to stimulate their Tao heart. I could make 2 roller coasters, he realized. One is a thrilling and typical roller coaster, which has lifelike animatronic recreations of sea monsters, and the other is a chill and thematic ride containing fossils that stimulates their reverence for ancient creatures. He didn't even have to limit himself to 2 roller coasters. He could build an entire theme park dedicated to mermen. He'd be able to attract the attention of mermen who wanted to strengthen their Tao heart, and he'd get the attention of humans who wanted to experience the world of mermen. He'd been wanting to build a theme park for the longest time, and it seemed that he'd finally get the chance to do it. He immediately excused himself and teleported back to their headquarters in Metropolis. He searched for Kong, the chief engineer in Reborn, who designed the first roller coaster, and the results spoke for themselves. He was sure that with Kong's help, they'd be able to create a theme park so attractive that the mermen would have no choice but to spend all of their sand dollars towards him. Boss, what can I do for you? Kong was surrounded by the other engineers of Reborn, with most of them coming from the Hobmenki lineage. Hey guys, I have a new idea that I want to build. It's a roller coaster again, but this time, I want it to be specifically made for mermen. The engineers looked at each other awkwardly. We can build the structure, boss, but we don't have any clue about mermen, Kong admitted. He then told them about his findings, with the roller coasters making use of 2 items to manufacture emotions from the mermen. The scary ocean monster animatronics for one, and the amazing fossils for the other. They seemed intrigued about the idea, but there was still a hint of unsurety in their eyes. It was as if they weren't confident that they could pull off the idea properly. Right now, I want to build 2 roller coasters, but in the future, we can add different attractions to create a theme park. There could be a carousel underwater, a rain park, a massive aquarium, and so on and so forth. Despite his grand ambitions, he saw his engineers struggle to keep up with his ideas. This probably stems from the fact that they'd never seen a theme ride before. Would you like me to show them an example of theme parks? Really? That'd be awesome. It is one of the perks of my software upgrade, ChatJK5 said proudly. However, I would need the help of him. Harbinger appeared in the void of his mind, seemingly with his hands crossed. I didn't hear, please. I do not have that in my vocabulary. Michael had to interject their little spat, or else they'd go on and on like a pair of bickering siblings. Harbinger, can you do it, please? Fine, but only for the fact that this roller coaster will bring us closer to Sudrops. Tongue sticking out. A few seconds later, ChatJK5 gave him instructions on how to share information from his memories. All he had to do was look at the yellow Hobmenki engineers and allow them access to the neural network of ChatJK5. Suddenly, multiple threads of ability power sprawled out from his heart and reached the engineers, tapping into their minds. Kong and his team reeled back, as if they were hit directly on the forehead. Their eyes rolled back and showed only its whites as memories began to flash in their brains. They saw a first-person perspective of him walking through a theme park, seeing the giant, towering structures that echoed screams from the inside. They saw animatronics performing human-like movements, making characters seem like they were alive. And everywhere they looked, they could see famous characters and their settings decorated throughout every piece of landmark around them. Even the food was in line with the park's theme. The whole process took just a few milliseconds, but the engineers felt like they'd seen through a lifetime. Now, they were filled with the knowledge and know-how to build their own theme park. The one key takeaway they had from this experience was that theme parks attracted both the young and the old. There was something for everyone, not just the thrill seekers or the adrenaline junkies. He could see all the engineers' brains start to rumble with inspiration. They were now seeing the same vision that Michael had in his mind. It was a place where thousands upon thousands of mermen walked along their theme park, having fun and experiencing something magical. And of course, at the end of the day, the total number of sand dollars they earned from this would reach in the thousands and possibly more. "We can definitely do this, boss." Kong saluted. "Good. I now hereby call you the Reborn Imagineers." Kong and the engineers smiled proudly at their new title. It wasn't long before their little group began brainstorming all of the things that they could build with the two roller coasters. For the thrilling roller coaster, "I envision the ride going through the mouth of the Kraken," Kong said. "That's good, sir. I think that we should use real parts of sea monsters to build the structures. It'll make it all the more real." "That can be done. There are some rare items sold that contain real sheddings of these ancient sea monsters. We can definitely use them to build our animatronics." They began throwing out ideas after ideas with excitement in their eyes. They were inspired. Michael already knew it was right to let Kong and the engineers handle this. He could see their ideas evoking great emotion from the mermen. They would definitely fear the roller coaster if they had to go into the mouth of the Kraken at the very start. As for the theme ride, "We can build a boat ride that simulates the ancient era." "Yes," Kong agreed. "We'll have the fossils come alive using magic and animatronic, making the mermen feel like they're back in time, where the oceans were littered with ancient monsters." Michael let them continue to brainstorm. It would probably take a while before they finalized the design of the two themed rides. However, that didn't mean that he couldn't work on it now. He needed to find two things. First, he needed the body parts of monsters living in the sea. It would be great if it was preserved in a pristine condition. The effect of the ride would be much greater if the mermen could see, feel, and smell the monster right in front of them. Second, he needed to find fossils. This one, he wasn't sure if he'd be able to get a lot of. After all, he needed fossils that came from the ocean. And those could only be found on landmass that was previously a body of water millions of years before. Chapter 647. Visiting for materials. Both of those things were hard to find, but not impossible. It would certainly be easier if he had the help of a professional. And thankfully, he knew just the man. He teleported out of the Rebornian Imagineers meeting room and arrived at the front entrance of Barnaby's vault. It had only been a few days since the auction, and already, the place had been cleaned sparkly clean, with no sign of the momentous event that happened before. As soon as the attendant at the door saw him, his eyes widened and flusteredly tripped on his own feet. Sir Michael, is Barnaby there?" he asked. Barnaby is at his office, sir," the man saluted. There was a brief moment of silence between the two. "Can I come in?" he finally asked. Yes. Finally, he was let inside, with the attendant's astonished gaze still following him as he walked. He made his way to the second floor and into Barnaby's office. And before he could even knock, the door suddenly burst wide open as Barnaby welcomed him inside. "Michael, my favorite customer," Barnaby said, shaking his hands furiously. "How've you been, my boy? Man, this guy is super fast. Does he have a SSS class skill or something?" "I'm doing good. Come on, sit, Barnaby said, leading him to the sofa. To what do I owe the pleasure? Aren't you supposed to be busy preparing for the arrival of the tourists? Everyone's going on and on about sand dollars, doing everything they can to attract mermen. That's actually what I came here for, he said. I'm currently planning on a project and I need a few exotic materials. Exotic? Barnaby raised his eyebrow. Well, you've come to the right place. What do you need? Phoenix feathers? Golden eggs? Lightning in a bottle? None of those. I need ancient sea fossils. Barnaby stopped for a second and scratched his double chin. That's definitely an exotic request. Do you have anything in particular in mind? Anything, as long as they're sea creatures. How many do you need? 5? 10? More. As much as you can get. Barnaby looked surprised. It seemed that the project Michael was building was a lot bigger than he expected. I have no idea what you're aiming for, but I'm very excited to see it. Let's see. I have a few fossils in my vault, but none of them are from the sea. I have some contacts with collectors, and I'm sure that they can give you what you want. If we're lucky, then they'll even be able to get a perfectly preserved megalodon. But I'm not sure if they'd be willing to sell that out of their personal collection. Barnaby immediately went to work, writing a letter and sending it out via carrier pigeon. It'll probably take a week for them to respond. Come back in a few days, Barnaby said. Will do, but I actually have another request. I need perfectly preserved body parts of sea monsters. Barnaby started chuckling. Preserved sea monsters? Are you trying to scare the merman away or what? He said, joking. Yup. While everyone was busy trying to find ways to attract mermen to their companies, it seemed that Michael was doing the exact opposite. Barnaby opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but chose not to in the end. Knowing you, you probably have something in store that will blow everyone away, right? Hopefully, he replied. Well, I have a few preserved sea monster parts in my vault, but I doubt that that's enough for you. I think you have to ask Raptor's help on this one. They specialize in making clothes and armor out of monsters, including ones that come from the sea. Michael nodded. Raptor's company, Crocodile Leather, was part of the Rising Six for a reason, so they definitely have the things he needed. He thanked Barnaby for all his help and went on his way to the Crocodile Leather Company. As he left Barnaby's vault, he took out his drone and let it hover in front of him. He quickly pressed the tiny doors on the drone's frame, allowing him to teleport straight in its pocket dimension. Once inside, he headed straight to the control room and piloted the drone to the skies. It wasn't long before he found his destination. Even without the map Barnaby gave to him, he could easily spot Raptor's company from a mile away. It was a large building in the shape of a cowboy boot, which seemed to have been made out of real leather as well. He got out of the drone and floated down to the entrance. Sorry, authorized. The guard was about to turn him away, but he realized who he was. You're the Michael Vanderbilt. Yup. Can I talk to Reptar? Nodding furiously, the guard immediately opened the door and guided him inside the giant cowboy boot building. And as he walked inside, he could see all employees looking at him with gazes of amazement. Eventually, they reached Reptar's office. Michael. Yo, Reptar said, giving him a high five. What brings you around? I heard that you're the man to speak about my request. And that is preserved ocean monsters. The more pristine, the better. Reptar gave him the same look as Barnaby. Practically everyone would be confused with his request, which seemed very counterintuitive given the merman's fear of those creatures. Well, I don't have those, but I can tell you where to get them. There's an old fishing village just west of Metropolis that specializes in those kinds of things. Just tell them that I sent you, and they'll sell you anything you want. Reptar gave him the directions for the fishing village, which he was very thankful for. He talked with Reptar a little bit more and got a tour of their building, all the while Reptar's employees stared at them wherever they went. And just as he was about to leave, Reptar stopped him and had a little request. Hey, can I have a box of RD soda? My employees have been craving for it, but it's never available. Yeah, sure. I'll send a few crates as thanks. As soon as he said that, the entire room erupted in cheers. After visiting those two, Michael headed straight to the magic tower. His visit to this place had been long overdue, but he never found the time. Now, he wanted to visit them because he needed Braxton's help. From what he showed in the auction, it seemed that Braxton specialized in creating realistic constructs and homunculi. In order to make the animatronics to be as real as possible, then he needed to learn how Braxton made his pigs so lifelike despite being constructed out of magic. He entered the base of the magic tower and walked through the halls as if he'd already been here before. As it turned out, this magic tower looked exactly like the magic tower back in Kingsbridge Town where Cerberus resided. The only difference were the decorations and the mages around him, but the structure was practically the same. There was even a dedicated place where mages and wizard played chess. Chapter 648. Passing on the Curse. Cerberus told him that chess had become extremely popular within the wizard circles, and it seemed that he was right. Even without formally introducing the game to Metropolis, the Magic Tower already had an established room for the wizards to play in. It even looked like they'd been playing for 2 years at least. "Are you interested in the game?" Michael turned around and followed the voice, seeing a middle-aged man with pepper hair and a rectangular mustache behind him. Judging purely from the fact that the mana surrounding this man was incredibly dense, it was easy to guess that this was the Tower Master. "Lucius Waterloo, Tower Master of Metropolis," he greeted. "I have been waiting for your arrival, Michael Vanderbilt. Your mentor has told me all about you." "My mentor?" he asked. "Ah, you mean Cerberus?" "The man exactly. You don't know how much I've cursed that name for not telling me about you properly. If I had known you were such a talented mystic user, then I would have welcomed you to Metropolis myself." Lucius walked forward and joined him in the balcony overlooking the rows of tables with chessboards. "There is one thing I'm curious about. Your talent definitely gives you the privilege to become a mystic master. Why have you not?" "No offense, but I have better things to do," he replied honestly. "I feel like I can make a larger difference in the world if I continue with my company. But if I become a mystic master, I'll be forced in a secluded study away from the world I so desperately want to change." Lucius looked at him and nodded. One could see in his eyes that he was dismayed that such a once-in-a-lifetime genius like Michael wasn't part of the guild. It is true that mystic master students have a similar training to monks, but with your talent, I'm sure exceptions can be made. They'd be more than willing to give you leeway to do what you want, and still be part of the guild. Michael shrugged. "I don't want to be tied down, but I am planning on visiting the Guild of Arcana in the future." The Tower Master was saddened for a second, but his eyes lit up once he realized something. Yes, do that. I won't tell them about your talents just yet. I want to see the look on those old geezers' faces when you show them yourself." There was an almost evil look on Lucius' face that reminded him of Cerberus. It seemed that Tower Masters had a natural tendency to become weirdos. In truth, Lucius was just doing what Cerberus had done to him. He wanted to get satisfaction by letting those geezers experience the same heart-stopping shock he experienced when he first found out about Michael. It was a cycle of schadenfreude. "Anyway, what brings you here?" Lucius asked, his mood brightened. "Just say the word and we'll bring you what you want." "Well, I do have a request," he said. "I saw that the wizards in the auction game could create very realistic homunculi, and I wanted to find out how they're doing it." Lucius pursed his lips. "To tell you the truth, our homunculi are made out of a magical skeletal structure that is proprietary to the Guild of Arcana, and that I can't divulge." That was a shame, but he didn't give up. All he had to do was to see the skeletal structure once, and he could have ChatGK5 copy it within a second. "Can I see it?" Lucius thought about it for a moment before an idea struck his mind. "How about we have a bet? If you win, I'll let you see the skeletal structure. And if I win, then we can get a reservation for your automobiles once you can sell them." "Sounds reasonable," he replied. "What's the game?" The Tower Master flashed a proud smile before pointing down at the chessboards. "We'll play chess. Do you know about it?" Michael could only chuckle to himself. 30 minutes later, Lucius sat on the table, grabbing his head in frustration. The tower master is losing. Did you see Michael's moves? It's like he knew the tower master's moves in advance. I think it's better if Lucius surrenders his king now to save his dignity. In this magic tower, Lucius was considered to be the best player among the wizards. No one could beat him. That was why he was so confident betting against Michael. But now, with most of his pieces already off the board, leaving behind only a few pawns and his king, he was most certainly done for. How? Michael moved his queen, creating a checkmate. And that's the game, he said, shaking Lucius' hand. I thought this was your first time playing? Michael shrugged. I never said that. You just assumed. How? Oh, it's because I invented chess. Lucius froze in place, before his head slowly turned towards Michael. What? Yeah. Chess was one of the first products of the Reborn company. He turned the chessboard over, letting Lucius see the R brand etched into the very wood. As the realization dawned on Lucius, his jaws opened wide. So, can I get the magic skeleton now? He asked. A few seconds later, a shout could be heard reverberating out of the magic tower, surprising the pedestrians walking in front. Curse you, Cerberus! Lucius could see Cerberus' face in the sky, rolling on the clouds because of his uncontrolled laughter. He purposefully neglected to tell him that Michael was the one who invented chess. Michael, when you get to the Guild of Arcana, you better not tell any of them that you invented chess. Okay? There was a manic look on Lucius' face. He was desperate to continue the cycle of shock. Cerberus got outsmarted by Michael in chess, which he passed down to Lucius. And now, like a curse, Lucius wanted to pass it down towards someone else and take the burden off himself. Michael got a first-hand look at the magic tower's vaults. There were a lot of treasures located inside here, which all emanated magic like a spell. And at the end of the vault, he saw a couple of glass containers lined up against the wall. Most of them contained inactive homunculi. Their faceless and featureless expressions would have been the perfect display for horror houses in a theme park. At the very center seemed to be a skeletal figure, but not one typical of humans. It looked like a stick figure with one long stick as the torso and the head, with 4 limbs attached to make up the arms and the legs. ChatJK5, have you seen it properly now? Yes. I have stored and analyzed its magic theory. You will be able to replicate it using your own magic. A surge of information washed over his mind, giving him a basic understanding of this skeletal structure that gave the homunculi a realistic depiction. I see. So it's using the stacked effect of magic, just like the technique Braxton used. Now that he knew how simple it was, he knew that he'd be able to customize it to any shape he wanted, including sea monsters, current and ancient alike. Chapter 649, Seer. While Michael prepared for the creation of his merman theme park, the other companies in Metropolis weren't just sitting still. They were preparing. Specifically, they were getting ready to welcome a specific group of mermen rumored to visit Metropolis in the coming days. And if those rumors were to be believed, then they could expect whales to start landing in Metropolis. This name was not due to the mermen's physical attributes, but instead because of their wealth. They had sand dollars aplenty. Meanwhile, far east of Metropolis, there was a large convoy consisting of about 20 or so carriages, each enough to house about 4 humans in total. However, the passengers on this convoy weren't human at all. They were beast folk, specifically mermen. The direction of their travels headed straight towards Metropolis, but it would probably take them at least half a month before they arrived. Since they were beings used to the comfort of the raging sea, these mermen took frequent stops along the way. They were uncomfortable with the seats, as in the water, they simply just swam to their destination and were practically weightless. They took camp along a clearing in the forest. And instead of building a campfire to keep them warm, they instead dug a huge hole in the ground and used their powers to create a small pond where they could take a dip to refresh the moisture in their bodies. The children basked in the water, finally in a good mood, while the adults prepared a simple salad containing seaweed, corals, and a little bit of preserved krill for their protein. As they prepared their camp, one merman had a little bit of trouble taking a stone out of the ground. Reed, can you help? When a problem occurred, They always turned to Reed, who was in charge of the whole convoy. He was a middle-aged merman with distinct red scales surrounding his face, and a tall stature. Stature within the merman community was dictated by the amount of raised shark teeth-like bumps on their skin, acting as sort of a tattoo. It was a symbol of growth in their Tao heart. The more bumps, the more respected he was. And Reed was the merman who had the most, with his entire body littered with shark teeth-like bumps. After Reed helped the merman, he turned to his wife. Our trip to the surface world has been worth it so far, just from seeing the looks on our children's faces. Kids' Tao hearts can be easily stimulated. This little experience will do wonders for them, he said. His wife showed a pained smile on her face. It's true. I just hope that it's the same for our little girl. They both walked towards their carriage and peeked into the partition. Inside the dark room, they saw a little mermaid girl shriveled up in the corner. She wasn't sleeping, as she had her eyes open, but it didn't look like she was alive either. She might be awake, but there was no fire within her eyes. Nixie, dear, why don't you play outside with the other children? Reed asked his daughter. They're having a lot of fun out there. We can escort you there, if you'd like, said her mother. But Nixie didn't react. She just kept staring out into the darkness, not reacting to any stimuli. Both Reed and his wife could only sigh in dismay. They were both about to close the blinders when they heard a grunt from Nixie. They quickly turned around and saw her clutching her heart in pain. As unfortunate as it was, this was the only emotion she had ever exhibited throughout her life. Nixie! Reed shouted in alarm, quickly coming over to hold his daughter. We need help over here. She needs her medicine. It wasn't long before the other mermen in their group gathered at his call. An old mermaid, one with eyes blurry like that of a pearl, boarded their carriage and sat next to Nixie. She examined the child, touching the heart that was causing pain. Nixie flinched, showing a distressed reaction. How is it, old seer? Reed asked. Her condition is getting worse, said old seer, shaking her head. Her Tao heart is deteriorating faster and faster. The only way for a Tao heart to continue growing was if they were stimulated with new experiences. One of the ways to accomplish that was through combat. However, Nixie's Tao heart was far too weak to exercise. She couldn't even get up off her bed. Unfortunately, that only caused her Tao heart to deteriorate even further. It seemed was an unwinnable situation. Nixie's parents held each other's hands in worry. Should we go back? Is the surface world too much for her to bear? Reed asked worriedly. The old seer sighed. No, it is much better for her to continue her journey in the surface world. Her Tao heart would have grown a lot weaker if not for our trip here. Reed gritted his teeth. If only he could exchange all of his wealth, his power, and his influence to cure his daughter, then he would do so in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, this Tao heart disease was something that not even the great seas could solve. Out of pure desperation, they journeyed out of Atlantis and into the surface world in search for an answer. Will our daughter really be healed here? Reed asked. The old seer's pearl-like eyes glowed, with the raging seas and terrifying currents reflected off its surface. Yes, she answered. The seas dictate that the cure for your daughter's disease will be found in the surface world. This gave Reed the confidence to continue their journey. The only person who can give us the answers we want is the world's greatest healer. Sinclair, he said. We shall head to Metropolis as soon as possible. One of Sinclair's students has set up their own apothecary branch there. Seeing the shorty in Reed's eyes, the old seer gave him a warning. I'd like to remind you that the answers you're looking for may not be in the place you've been searching in. Prophecies were never as direct as possible. From the old seer's experience, it was almost impossible to guess the truth behind those predictions. After all, it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. It was even possible that the person who would cure Nixie may not be a healer at all. In an office filled with exotic plants and herbs growing along the walls and the cabinets, Aerith showed an expression of pure focus. She picked up a vial of a glowing violet liquid and gently poured it into a beaker containing water. As the two liquids mixed, an explosive reaction occurred that broke the beaker into countless shards. Another failed one, she cursed. Mrs., I do not think that this is possible. One of her assistants said gently, trying not to offend her. There has never been a way to artificially strengthen a Tao heart. Aretha's goals were ambitious. As a chemist, she believed that she could solve Beastfolk's Tao heart problem through her concoctions alone. It was an arrogance she learned from Sinclair herself. Unfortunately, no matter how much she tried, she just couldn't find the solution. Chapter 650, Fisherman. Michael looked at the map in his hands given to him by Reptar. This detailed the exact location of the fishing village that was supposed to have the preserved sea monsters that they caught from the ocean. He immediately hopped on his drone and began piloting it through the skies. Thankfully, it seemed that the control room in the pocket dimension could display the directions that ChatJK5 made for him with the map. The trip was quite long since he had to go all the way to the edge of the royal continent, but he was quite comfortable in his subspace. He could even take a short nap to pass the time. Eventually, he was awoken by a ringing bell inside the control room, which indicated that he had reached his destination. He looked at the drone's perspective and saw a quaint little village propped up in a wooden dock just by the sea. Boats of all sizes were tied down on the posts, which seemed to all be specialized for speed. Most of them looked like a big kayak with wooden poles attached to the sides for better balance. It was the middle of the day, so there were quite a lot of fishermen unloading their catches in the morning. They hauled nets with fishes squirming inside, trying to get out. His eyes narrowed when he realized that some of the things they caught weren't exactly a normal fish. There was one fisherman who had to get help from 10 other fishermen to unload a net onto the dock. Mind you, the fish seemed to have already been caught, but it was still fighting with an unrelenting tenacity and strength that simply exhausted the fisherman. Eventually, the fishermen wrangled the catch onto the dock, showing that they seemed to have caught a monstrous squid-like monster that was even bigger than a colossal squid from his previous life. It seemed to be much stronger too, as the monster whipped one of its tentacles in retaliation from its captors, bending a thick metal post on the dock. If it weren't for the fisherman tying up its tentacles with a masterful technique that prevented it from moving, then it would have caused tremendous amounts of damage in the dock, causing the whole thing to collapse and destroying tens of fishermen houses built on top of it. Now that looks like a 3-star monster, and it seems suitable enough for my roller coasters. He looked down and saw the fisherman who caught it to enter a run-down wooden building with the sign, Quint's Tackle Shop, and it just so happens that the very person Reptar recommended him was the very same man. He quickly got out of the drone and floated down into Quint's shop. As he got closer to the fishing village, the 3-star squid monster seemed to have noticed his presence and cowered under his natural pressure. The fisherman immediately noticed that something was wrong. After all, the fierce and unrelenting monster that could destroy a whole village wouldn't suddenly turn limp because it was captured. They followed the direction where its constricted pupils were directed at, leading them to look up at the golden-haired boy slowly floating down towards them. Holy smokes! A boy! He ignored all their stares and went over to Quint's shop, with a bell ringing from the door as soon as he opened it. The distinct smell of pungent fish hit his nose. It was intense. It was so bad that he had to use magic to dispel the stench from his nose, making him wonder how anyone could live in this place. In fact, it seemed that he was the only one bothered with the smell. There were a few other people here who seemed to be looking around the bait section of Quint's shop. Is this the right place? The whole shop was decorated with fishing equipment, some rusted, some scratched, and some with minimal wear. All along the walls he saw trophies of preserved fish heads displayed proudly, with its species and the date he caught it carved in the wooden frame. This is definitely the right place. What do you want? He turned forward and saw a grumpy-looking old man with a mullet and an unkempt mustache lounging on his chair as if he wanted to sleep in it. Are you Quint? None other, the man replied. I heard that you're the man to speak to when looking for preserved sea monsters. Quint opened his eyes and took a look at Michael. How did you know about that? Reptar sent me, he replied. That got a reaction from Quint, making him stand up and gaze at Michael a lot more closely. That boy sent ya, huh? You must be some kind of a big shot, Quint commented, rubbing mustache. He never lets anyone know about me, That disloyal son of mine. He's your son? Michael asked, surprised. Yup. Now what do you want? 3 star? For star. Michael would have wanted to learn more about their situation, but first things first, he had to secure the monsters. 7 star at the minimum, but I want anything you have. The stronger the better. It'll be great if you have those that are in perfectly preserved conditions. Quint tapped his hand on the wooden table while in thought. 7 star? Well, now you've piqued my interest. While I do not have any high-leveled sea monsters preserved in pristine conditions, I can certainly try and make that for you. You're going to be hunting for them? It's a challenge, Quint said, smiling and showing his missing teeth. And I'm not one to back away from such a dare. Quint picked up his fishing equipment and began preparing for his challenge. You can expect the result in a month, he said, putting multiple rations on his bag. A month? Does it really take that long? That was bad because the whole parade might have already ended before he got the preserved monster parts he needed. It usually takes just a few days, but I have a lot of pending orders from my other customers, Quint said. Just then, the bell inside the shop rang as a few newcomers entered the room. It seemed that they weren't local to this village. After all, their attire signaled their stature to be of someone who lived in a town or even a city. Not only that, but they also weren't used to the stench of fish inside the shop. Sir Quint, I'm here to add another ton of fish in my order, a young man with blonde hair demanded. Quint nodded. You'll get it in 2 months. 2 months? Why the hell would it take that long? Because after your original order, I've got a new order from this young bloke over here, said Quint. So your next order will have to wait until I finish his. It's first come, first served. However, the blonde man seemed unsatisfied with that. He fumed before turning to Michael and glaring at him. You have to rescind your order, he demanded. Michael tilted his head. And why would I do that? Because I'm more important than you. Don't you know that I'm going to be moving to Metropolis soon? I'm about to get my permit. Chapter 651. Merman Arrival. Your permit? Michael asked. Yes. After my test, then I'll be able to move my company to Metropolis, the greatest territory in all of the royal continent. The blonde man praised. Of course, the other people beside him immediately went in with their support. That's right. Our boss is going to be the next big thing over there. First, it's the permit. Then it's the minor factions. And after that, it's the major factions. We're destined at the top. Think of it this way. You'll be helping someone that will eventually stand with the likes of Alaric Goldstone. That is an honor you should be proud of. Their eyes glazed with praise and adoration as they talked about the Alaric Goldstone. Humph, you don't even know who that is? The blonde boy asked derisively. He's only the strongest leader in all of Metropolis. He has no equal. Even that potbowl guy is no match to him. Michael couldn't help but chuckle to himself. He couldn't believe he met people who were certified Alaric fans. What are you laughing about? Come outside. I'll teach you something about strength. Let's duel. The blonde boy and his entourage walked outside, eyeing Michael as they did. Michael, feeling that this was quite amusing, followed them outside. This will be a good practice for me, said the blonde boy. I'll need to sharpen my dueling skills if I'm going to compete in Metropolis. Are you sure you want to duel me? Michael asked. Of course. No backing out now, replied the blonde man. Michael shrugged and waited for the blonde man to finish his stretching routine. Okay, I'm ready, said the blonde man. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the fishing village, there was a man who was running towards the dock with an excited look on his face. In his hands was a folded-up newspaper straight from the company. Eventually, he reached Quint's shop and found his leader facing off against some kind. What's happening? He asked his teammates. Our boss is going to teach that boy a lesson. Anyway, did you get it? The man proudly showed off the roll of newspaper in his hands. Yup, and I haven't read it yet so that we could all see what happened at the auction together. These innocent and naive groups of people were extreme fanatics of Metropolis and Alaric. They consumed anything and everything related to them. So, When they heard that the auction had occurred a few nights ago, they were very excited to read about the exploits and wondrous feats that Alaric performed in the auction. However, it was quite hard to get into Metropolis, so it was only now that they got a copy of the newspaper the day after the auction. And now, they were finally ready to read it. All four of them opened the newspaper with bated breaths, with their faces glowing with excitement. Finally, they saw it. On the front page was the illustration of the boy called Michael Vanderbilt, the wondrous genius who was able to beat Alaric in the final game of the auction. They looked up at the boy just a few meters away from them, then looked back at the newspaper. And no matter how many times they looked at it, the two were exactly the same. A dawning realization came to them. Wait! But just as they issued their warning, they suddenly saw their leader get blown back towards them, toppling them all like they were bowling pins. After learning about his true identity, the blonde man and the rest of his entourage sat on their knees and begged for forgiveness. They were so scared to think that they'd angered the person who was able to defeat the Alaric Goldstone. And not only him, but it seemed that the person in front of them was able to go toe-to-toe against all of the major faction leaders in Metropolis. On the bright side of all this, the blonde man was more than happy to delay his order, so that Michael could receive his preserved sea monster carcass a lot sooner than he expected. Thanks to that, his plans for the roller coaster would go as planned. After finishing all of his preparations, Michael immediately transported himself to the parched lands. As expected of his Rebornian Imagineers, they'd already been hard at work preparing for the Merman theme park. "Boss!" Kong greeted him with a smile. "We're planning on putting the 2 roller coasters here and there." Kong pointed towards the empty space right next to the original roller coaster. It was the most convenient spot. However, Michael had another idea. He wanted to build it in a separate location, one far away from the current roller coaster. "We should build it on the opposite side of the nation of Reborn. That way, we can plan ahead for the other attractions we're going to build." His idea was that Rebornians and tourists alike could see the Merman theme park on their right side, and the normal theme park on the left side. "Ah, I see," Kong said, understanding his vision. With a little bit of brainstorming with the other engineers, they were able to create a new floor plan for the theme park. Michael took a look and was satisfied with what he saw. They didn't just build the roller coasters, they built the entire park, complete with the themed walkways, buildings, and even the concession stands. There was even a branch of McTony's Chicken, ready to serve juicy fried snacks while waiting in line. There were a lot of things they needed to build, but for now they were focusing on the roller coasters itself. Michael needed them to be completed before the parade in Metropolis started. A few hours later, large steel pillars floated in the air and were installed into their rightful place, guided by the engineers. "Fairies reporting for duty," Vivi said, saluting to Michael. Thanks to their fairy dust, tons of metals became as light as a feather, making their workload a lot easier. Meanwhile, Reed's convoy of carriages finally arrived at the entrance of Metropolis. Reed and his wife held their daughter's hand as they looked up at the bustling civilization of humans just in front of them. "We just need a little more and we can finally cure you," Reed said to Nixie, squeezing her hand tight. Eventually, he nodded to their driver to continue forwards and finally stepped foot into this vast human city. The human guards made them stop at the gate to inspect the carriage. "Welcome to Metropolis. What is the purpose of your visit?" The guard's eyes widened as he peeked into the carriage, seeing people with scales on their bodies staring back at him. Merman. Reed cleared his throat. "We have come as a visitor to the one called Aerith, from Metropolis branch of Sinclair's Elixir." And used to seeing a merman, the guard just froze in place. It wasn't until Reed cleared his throat again in impatience did he finally react. The guard went back and verified with their records that Aerith did indeed schedule visitors to her colony. "Very well, sir. You may proceed." The group of mermen entered Metropolis, with only the cure in their minds. Chapter 652. Apothecary Visit. Reed's visit into Metropolis wasn't official. They weren't part of the horde of tourists that would be welcomed with a parade. That was why they went largely unnoticed by the general public. If one didn't peek through the curtains of their carriage, then many would assume that they were just any other convoy of humans. After all, unlike the other tourists who had a lot of time to spend to relax and enjoy Metropolis, Reed and his family were on a time limit. Nixie's Dow heart was getting weaker and weaker by the day. They needed the help of a professional, the very best of the best. And that was none other than Sinclair's Elixir, a global conglomerate headed by the miraculous healer, Sinclair. Their carriage stopped as they reached what seemed to be a large gardenscape in the middle of Metropolis. Instead of walls, the whole estate was lined with shrubbery that was neatly cut into a tall rectangular shape. The strong scent of medicine wafted through the air as precious herbs and plants were carefully positioned throughout the garden. Just then, they saw a human watering the plants with a sprinkler can. "We're here to see Aerith," Reed said to him. The farmer looked at him and nodded, before casting a magic circle in his hands. Eventually, the shrubbery wall opened up, allowing their carriages to go inside. Reed and his convoy continued on before they finally reached the apothecary. At the very entrance, they saw a young woman with pink hair tied up in a ponytail waiting for their arrival. Reed immediately got out of their carriage, carrying Nixie in his arms. He went up the stairs and begged, "Please save my daughter." Aerith looked at the mermaid child, her eyes narrowing as she realized the severity of her condition. "According to your letters, it seemed that her condition worsened even more than before," she said. Reed had been trying to contact Sinclair even before he arrived in the royal continent. However, she was too busy and he was redirected towards one of her pupils, Aerith. "Can you heal her?" Reed asked. Aerith didn't answer. She then took out her mithril relic needle, manifesting the giant frog diva above her. Feeling for her pressure points, Aerith targeted the straight line dividing the child's body. The needle pricked the little mermaid's skin, drawing blood that immediately transformed into a small toad. These frogs made out of pure ability power started to release slime from their body, injecting a healing form into Nixie's skin. The child's expression softened for a second, her pain lessening. But a few moments later, she cringed as she felt another pricking sensation in her Dow heart. Aerith could only shake her head. "I'm powerless," she admitted. "Nixie's disease is on her Dow heart, and we both know that the powers of a Dow heart and abilities are one and the same. If I try to force her healing, her Dow heart would reject it almost immediately and make her condition worse." Reed gritted his teeth. "But don't lose hope yet," she said. "I have asked for my seniors' help on this one. They'll be more equipped to handle this than me." While Michael was overlooking the construction of the roller coasters, he suddenly felt a reaction from one of his shadow clones. He closed his eyes and felt around, eventually realizing that it was coming from the clones he left behind in the Duchess castle. "She's trying to contact me." He immediately transported himself back into Metropolis, standing face to face with Duchess Regina herself. They were sitting in her dining hall, with plenty of food and drinks served on the table. "Did you call me here for a meal, Duchess?" "No," she said, using her handkerchief to wipe off RD soda from her lips. "I called you for something better." He was intrigued. "My soldiers have just informed me that a group of mermen has entered Metropolis," she said. "Mermen?" "Yes. They came here ahead of the parade and immediately went towards our branch of Sinclair's Elixir. Aerith is probably talking to them as we speak." "They went straight to an apothecary?" "Why?" The Duchess shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine. All I know is that the man leading the convoy is called Reed, and he has a lot of sway within the merman community. If he tells mermen to do something, then they'll most likely do what he says." He could hear the hidden implication in the Duchess' words. She was trying to hint at the fact that Reed was a linchpin to his plan of getting the attention of all the other mermen in the royal continent. "Thanks for the info, Duchess." "No problem. Fufufu. Just make sure to invite me to one of your projects next time." He looked at her and saw the hidden threat in her eyes. It seemed that she had finally learned about the nation of Reborn, and she was going to hate it if he didn't invite her inside. "All right, Duchess. I'll give you a personal tour of the parched lands once my projects are over," he promised her. "You teleport me there," she demanded. "Even with the speed of your automobiles, I don't want to spend weeks on end just sitting in a box." I'm too old for this. Fine. We'll take the whole royal family too. It'll be a family vacation. On me. The Duchess' face visibly lightened up. Foo-foo. I'm looking forward to it. I better be careful with this one. The reason why he hadn't voluntarily told the Duchess about the nation of Reborn was because he didn't want her to become like Duke Stelmane. Even now, the Duke had been staying in the nation of Reborn and completely neglected his duties in Angora City. He had enjoyed his time in paradise for far too much, and it looked like he had no intentions of ever leaving it. He could only imagine the kind of chaos that would unfold in Metropolis if the Duchess disappeared for months and years on end. He shivered. After the Duchess' timely hint, he went back to the nation of Reborn to look for Serena. He found them and all the other mermen lounging in the Lamia's riverside property, basking in the sun and having a lot of fun. They had decided to stay in Metropolis for the time being, especially after he revealed the roller coasters to them. And despite not being used to the cultures of the surface world, the mermen were quick to love the nation of Reborn in its entirety. "Hey, Serena," he called out to her. Serena turned around and waved at him with a big smile on her face. "Whoa," he said, blocking his eyes with his face quickly blushing. It seemed that she had relaxed far too much in the river, as she didn't seem to be wearing any clothes. If it weren't for her curly red hair, then he would have seen. "Enough," he said, slapping himself silly. Why aren't you wearing anything?" he asked her. "What do you mean?" "I am wearing my clothes." She had turned into a full mermaid. Chapter 653, Apothecaries. Michael carefully peeked at gaps in between his fingers and saw that underneath her hair, Serena was wearing a bikini made out of shells that perfectly covered her natural mounds. "Oh," he said, awkwardly laughing. "I thought you were—" "Never mind. What brings you here? Has the roller coaster been finished?" she asked, unable to hide her excitement. She moved closer to him, making him recoil back in embarrassment. No. I'm here for something different. I heard that someone called Reed entered Metropolis quite recently. Know anything about him?" As soon as he said that, Serena's face turned sad. "Nixie," she muttered. "Nixie. That's his daughter," she explained. "I told you about our curse with Dow hearts, right? Usually, its deterioration only happens once beastfolks are of advanced age, when their bodies could no longer keep up with their spirit. However, there are some rare instances in which children would get affected by the curse of the Dow heart. Nixie is one such particular case. Her Dow heart is extremely fragile, so much so that she couldn't even swim around on her own. And if she tried to exercise and try to strengthen her Dow heart, the curse would immediately act up and make her feel an immense amount of pain. Even though he hadn't met this Nixie person yet, he already felt sorry for her. The fact that she couldn't even go out and do things on her own meant that her childhood was severely limited. It's a shame, really. There are hundreds of merman children who die from this curse yearly, and most of them wouldn't last to their 10th birthday. And unfortunately, Nixie is about to turn 10 soon. That's probably why Reed entered the surface world in the first place. He wanted to find a solution for his daughter's sickness. He'd do anything to save her. Michael finally realized why they headed straight for Eretha's apothecary shop as soon as they landed in Metropolis. They hoped that they could save her. Now, although he wasn't sure that they couldn't heal her Dow heart, he was pretty sure that he could, at the very least, help her condition. The roller coaster would be the perfect therapy for the little mermaid. She'd get all the benefits of experiencing a burst of emotions, while remaining in a completely still position as the roller coaster train rode through all the ups and downs of the ride. She could exercise her Dow heart without the risk. "Do you think the roller coaster can help her?" Serena's eyes widened with realization. She grabbed his shoulders and grabbed him in a big hug. "That's right. You have the roller coasters." She realized the perfect solution to Nixie's problems as well. "We have to go there now. I'll vouch for you. They know my reputation." Meanwhile, in Eretha's apothecary shop, Reed and his wife patiently waited in a dark room, with incense burning around them and creating a medical aroma. They had a worried expression as they saw their daughter laying on the floor, with a bunch of herbs and liquid concoctions rubbed on her skin. Opposite them was Aerith, who was continually setting up the room, grounding up a few crystals in a bowl and feeding it to little Nixie. I have sedated her, making her Tao heart beat as slow as possible to lessen its strain, she said to them. Are they going to come yet? Reed asked impatiently. They know that this is an emergency. I'm sure they're doing their best to arrive as soon as possible, Aerith assured them. Just then, the door to the room burst wide open as two people walked inside. A middle-aged woman in her late 30s immediately walked towards Nixie and bent down to inspect her. She didn't waste any time for greetings or niceties. Behind her was another woman, who seemed to be at the same age as Aerith. She held a bag in her hands, which seemed to be filled with medical instruments based on the bulge of the outline. Senior Juniper, Aerith greeted the older woman. How is the child? Juniper narrowed her eyes as she prodded at Nixie's chest. Her expression narrowed as she saw the child wince in pain just from a simple touch. It's good that you called me here as soon as possible. The curse on this child had advanced far enough for her life to be in danger. Theodora, get me my sage. Theodora, the woman she came with, quickly ruffled through the bag and gave her a few leaves as instructed. Juniper accepted the leaves and began casting her spells in quick succession. As Reed watched Juniper, he couldn't help but ask, was Sinclair unavailable to help us? She is currently in another continent, Aerith answered, but she has sent the second-best apothecary in the entire world. Senior Juniper is Master Sinclair's right-hand woman. We can trust that your daughter is placed in the right hands. Juniper's casting finished, creating a pillar of light that surrounded Nixie, who became engulfed with small light particles that got absorbed directly into her body. A few seconds later, her spell subsided. Nixie's expression visibly softened. Then, she opened her eyes, groggily looking around the room as if she was looking for something. Dad. Nixie, Reed called out to her, excited. You healed her. This was the first time in years that his daughter had spoken. It was a miracle. But despite this joyous occasion, Juniper, the woman who made this miracle happen in the first place, didn't celebrate at all. This is merely a delay, she said. I have healed the damage in her Tao heart, but it will continue to degrade if the root cause of her disease is not fixed. And can you do it? Reed asked, desperate. Unfortunately, the root cause of her problem is the curse of a Tao heart. It is not something that I nor Sinclair can fix. Reed was gut-wrenched. They traveled all the way here, yet they still couldn't find a cure for their daughter. It made him want to lose all hope. However, the look on his daughter's face instantly made him regain it. We're not going to give up on you, sweetheart. If they had to spend the rest of their lives in the surface world to give their daughter a brief moment of solace, then so be it. Just then, they heard a knock on the door. One of Aerith's gardeners peeked inside. Miss Aerith, there's someone here to see you. It is Princess Serena. Reed perked up. The princess? What is she doing here? Aerith nodded to his gardener to let the visitors enter her estate. It wasn't long before Princess Serena came inside the room with a boy right beside her. It was none other than Michael. Michael? Aerith gasped. Why are you with the princess? Serena greeted everyone with a bow. I'm sorry, princess, but we are currently in the middle of Nixie's treatment, said Reed. The princess nodded with a smile. That's exactly why I'm here. We may have found a cure for your daughter. The three apothecaries immediately reacted to her words with doubt. They knew that the curse of the Tao heart was as permanent as the heaven and the earth. Chapter 654. A cure? Really? Reed asked, already hopeful. Yes, and it's because of this person right here. Michael, Serena said, introducing the golden-haired boy right next to her. That's impossible, rebuked Theodora. Even Master Sinclair has not been able to find a way to solve the curse of the beastfolk. Theodora noticed that Michael was only barely in his teens. She would have had a much better chance of inventing the cure rather than him. Even Aerith couldn't help but express her doubt. Let's not get ahead of ourselves and set up these expectations. Princess Serena. Michael, can you please explain your claims? But just as Serena was about to explain, An intense shockwave suddenly erupted from the room, causing the plants and candles to be knocked over, and the incense to be put out. Michael felt the Godforge pieces in his heart react to the shockwave. This was not born from a physical explosion. This was caused by none other than the eruption of ability power. Everyone turned to Nixie, the very source of the shockwave. The little mermaid was now floating in the air, with droplets of water manifesting in the air and revolving around her. Reed immediately went over to his daughter to hold her, but the water droplets suddenly morphed and created a thin wall that rejected his advances. He fell on his back, wincing from the pain in his hands. Just from that brief contact with the water, he had suffered severe burns in his hands. Even without using his ability drone vision, Michael could see the aura surrounding the little mermaid. She was exhibiting ability power tremendously, much more than what a normal child like her should be able to use. It could practically rival Alaric or Potball's ability power intensity. Right now, she was exhibiting a 9th stage strength. "What's happening?" Reed asked the apothecaries. Juniper approached the floating Nixie with a frown. "The worst possible situation has just occurred," she said. "It seems that your daughter has just awakened as a blessed." Nixie had just turned 10 years old, which meant that she was at the age where she would find out if she was blessed with the Ocean King's power or not. Usually, those with the curse of the Tao heart turned out to be part of the unblessed group of mermen, so Reed never even thought that this would happen to his daughter. "What's going to happen to her?" "Her Tao heart is currently getting flooded with power from your supreme being," Juniper explained. "This should have baptized her body, making it stronger to accommodate the new power in her Tao heart. However, her Tao heart is already weak from the curse. Any additional power it receives will only cause further damage in her body. If this continues on, her Tao heart will explode. We'll have to operate on her or else she'll die." Reed was faced with a tough decision. Now, surgery wasn't that uncommon in this world. After all magnetics had to go through this process every time they needed to add Godforge pieces in their hearts. Humans have made strides to make that process as safe as possible. However, this surgery was a completely different matter. First of all, she was a merman. She had a different physiology than what these apothecaries were used to. Secondly, operating on a Tao heart while undergoing a blessing could cause the power in her body to suddenly leak out of her heart with extreme force and pressure. "Can you save her?" Juniper took a breath. "I'm not sure. However, if we don't operate on her now, then her death will be guaranteed." Reed gritted his teeth before nodding. "Do it. Do whatever you have to do to save my daughter." With the consent from the parent, Juniper immediately rushed into action. She raised her hand, and Theodora immediately knew to bring a sharp knife to her palms. "I'm starting the surgery," Juniper said, moving towards the floating Nixie. Watching this, Michael couldn't help but fidget in place. They're having surgery in this unsanitary place? It didn't even look like Juniper washed the knife that she was going to cut Nixie with. "Wait," he said, interrupting them. "You should sterilize the entire surgery room first, or else it could cause complications." Theodora looked at him, offended. "I'm sorry, but we are professional apothecaries. Not only that, but Senior Juniper herself is the second best healer in the entire world. She knows what she's doing without someone giving her advice." It did seem incredibly rude for Michael to have interrupted them, especially since they knew he had no experience with medicine or healing at all. But of course, he did have the knowledge of his previous life. And even if he wasn't a doctor, he knew that sterilization was one of the most important things to do in surgery. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Theodora said. "This is a time-sensitive matter, and we can't have." Theodora was cut off by Juniper, who raised her hand and stopped her words. "What do you suggest we do?" she asked Michael. And before Theodora could object, Michael reached into his pockets and clicked a switch, revealing his Unity saber. With the glowing Unity sword in his hands, he approached Juniper. The old apothecary didn't flinch, nor did she feel intimidated by his weapon. She simply let him do what he planned to do. Michael took the knife in her hands and gently used his Unity saber to skim the very surface of her blade, eliminating all bacteria. After that, he casted a spell that created an isolated rectangular box, giving just enough freedom for Juniper to operate on Nixie safely. And finally, he made a sweep inside the isolated surgery box, making sure to eliminate any and all harmful bacteria that was present around them. Watching this, Theodora couldn't help but express her doubt. Senior Juniper, why would you yield to the boy's whims? Is it not important to fix Nixie's heart as soon as possible? It's because he may be right, Juniper said, not taking her eyes off of Michael. What do you mean? Sinclair has long hypothesized that the diseases and complications brought about during surgery were caused by these creatures too small to be seen by the naked eye. She said that the only way to ensure the safety of the patient while in surgery was to eliminate those creatures and prevent their spread into the body. She had yet to publish her findings about this because she has yet to create a foolproof way of eliminating those creatures. But it seemed that this kid solved it all on his own. Sterilization. Juniper couldn't help but be amused at this unknown kid in front of her. Sinclair would be very amused to meet such a boy. Can we get on with the surgery now? Reed asked worriedly. Juniper was about to enter the surgery box when Michael interrupted yet again. There's just one thing left. We need anesthesia. It's a way for her to not feel any pain during surgery, he explained. Nixie was already experiencing pain every day. She didn't have to feel someone cutting through her body. Chapter 655. Modern Medicine. What? Theodora doubted. There's no way that you found. But again, Juniper stopped her from continuing her words. Although she agreed with Theodora that no one had found a natural alternative to numb the pain of surgery, she couldn't help but believe that the boy really might have found the solution. She wanted to see what he could come up with. Châtier femme, can you? Here's the instructions needed to create general anesthesia. I have modified it to fit with the physiology of Nixie specifically. Thankfully, it seemed that all the ingredients he needed were already present in the room. After all, this was an apothecary store. They had an abundance of herbs, plants, and all kinds of concoctions made for medicine. With a simple telekinetic spell, he gathered all of the ingredients in front of him, grinding them down, extracting them, and mixing them all together in the specific way ChatJK5 told him. Aerith and Theodora watched as his strange and seemingly arbitrary collection of herbs turned into a milky white liquid with unknown effects. Juniper, on the other hand, was more knowledgeable of the plants he used and was able to follow through with the logic of his choices. So he's using synthetic compounds. That's genius, she muttered in amazement. And with a small gesture from Michael, the anesthesia floated over to Nixie and got absorbed directly into her skin. Nixie immediately felt drowsy before eventually falling asleep. The ability power water surrounding her stopped sloshing around, becoming very still. It seemed that the anesthesia also sedated the power within her Tao heart, making the surgery a lot easier than before. It worked, Theodora exclaimed, shocked and in disbelief. Even when using magic or ability power, it was impossible to sedate the natural powers of a Tao heart to this extent. Miss Juniper, please continue, Michael said, bowing out. Now that he had done his job, he immediately stepped out and let the true professionals do their work. Even with ChatJK5 by his side, he wasn't sure if he could do a better job than the second-best healer in the entire world. Juniper snapped out of her stupor immediately and focused on the patient in front of her. She stepped inside the surgery box, with her entire body getting sterilized from bacteria. Once she was ready, she took out her blade and began the operation. With a quick but precise movement, she created a cut in Nixie's chest, exposing the Tao heart inside. A normal, healthy Tao heart was one that was continuously pumping blood and ability power throughout a person's body. And because of its importance, it was usually protected by a thick bone that wrapped around the entire heart like a casing. Nixie's heart was weak and deflated, pumped out of rhythm and with a weak pulse. Its surface didn't show a healthy red shade, but a darkened violet one instead. The parts that had deteriorated showed a blackish color with absolutely no movement at all. And the bone case of her heart had completely withered away, leaving it to be exposed. This is the most important and the most dangerous part, Juniper said. Her job was simple. All she had to do was find the holes in Nixie's heart and patch her up before the ability power that was pouring inside of her completely ripped her body from the inside out. However, what complicated this situation was that the holes were located inside her heart and gave no clue as to where it could possibly be. This meant that she had to open up Nixie's Tao heart out in the open. Now, with Michael's sterilization technique, this could be considered to be quite safe. However, the infection of the Tao heart wasn't the problem. It was the infection by the Tao heart that they had to worry about. Once Juniper made the cut, the intense amount of ability power inside it would spew out like a broken pipe, causing mayhem and destruction everywhere. Not only that, but they had to make sure that not too much ability power would leak out or else Nixie wouldn't have enough power to survive. "I'll need your help," Juniper said to Aerith and Theodora. "In order to contain the power in her Tao heart, I'll need a similar power to counteract it." Juniper's awakening as a blessed had a peak power equivalent to a 9th stage body formation magnetic. So, it was only appropriate that the 2 9th stage apothecaries would help her. "Wait, I can help," Michael again interjected. "Oh, come on," Theodora complained. "I can admit that you have good medical knowledge, but your strength simply isn't enough to contain Nixie's power." Even Juniper had to step in and stop Michael. "I think you'll have to sit this one out, young man. It's for your own good. Besides, their powers will be enough to fight against the surge of ability in Nixie's heart." From their perspective, Michael was merely a 4th stage magnetic. It was far too dangerous for him to get in contact with a power 5 stages above him. "You said that we need to contain the ability power that leaks out of her heart. Then I'm your best bet," Michael insisted. And before Theodora could say anything, Aerith interjected. "He's right. He can do this job better than us." Both Theodora and Juniper looked at Aerith as if she was crazy. Why would she let a kid handle powers way above his own? "This is far too dangerous for the likes of him," replied Juniper. "Trust me, he's strong enough," Aerith insisted. "If you want proof, then I'll tell you now that he was able to stand toe-to-toe against Potbowl and Alaric, and even win against them in a game." "Huh, what?" Juniper stared at Aerith. "Alaric? Alaric Goldstone? And Potbowl, as in the student of the Heavenly Knight Kruger? That Potbowl?" As much as Aerith wanted to gush about the incredible scene of their game back from the auction, she knew that they didn't have much time for any flashbacks. "All you have to know is that he can do this. He's the only one who can do this," she insisted. And before Juniper could say anything else, another shockwave erupted out of Nixie's body. Her heart's getting more and more unstable by the second. "I have to start the operation," she insisted. Then, she turned towards Michael and nodded. "I'm trusting you." And without further ado, she pushed her knife into Nixie's Tao heart, creating a small incision on the center. From that small gash, a bright white light emanated outwards, accompanied by a burst of ability power. Water molecules in the air started to turn chaotic, creating droplets out of thin air that suddenly shot out in random directions with the speed of a bullet. Aerith and Theodora immediately protected Reed and his wife from being accidentally hit. "We need to contain the power now," Juniper shouted. The cut was getting bigger as ability power rushed out of Nixie's Tao heart. Michael reached down into his pockets and took out an iron switch and a reverse graphite block, combining them to create a battery. Chapter 656. Suction. Nixie's Tao heart rampaged around the room like a tornado, with water droplets speeding up, becoming thin blades that started to rip apart everything it touched. Her heartbeat slowed down, yet the power surge from her ability power ramped up even higher. This contrast put a lot of strain into her already damaged heart. But just as the Tao heart was about to reach its breaking point, Michael held his hand out and pushed the battery closer to Nixie. Immediately, the ability power got diverted into his battery, as if they were magnetized. The water droplets in the room started to slow down, and the intensity in which it thrashed around got visibly weaker. All the ability power generated by Nixie's awakening were getting instantly siphoned by the battery, giving it no chance to wreak havoc in her Tao heart. Juniper could see Nixie's conditions improving greatly. Even as the ability power generated by her Tao heart increased almost exponentially, it all seemed to be absorbed by Michael's battery. "How is that possible?" Theodora gasped. Aerith was amazed with her. She finally knew how Michael could survive against those seemingly impossible to dodge attacks. He was absorbing them. Amazing, Juniper muttered. She couldn't believe that a mere fourth-stage magnetic could somehow survive an onslaught from an awakening of this level. His diva and his ability must be incredibly powerful if he could pull off such a feat. Meanwhile, the battery in Michael's hands reached 100%, prompting him to replace it with another immediately. "What should we do next?" he asked Juniper. The senior apothecary turned her focus on Nixie's Tao heart. "Keep on doing whatever you're doing. I'm gonna need to peek inside in order to fix the leaks." As Juniper used her hands to pry the Tao heart open, more and more ability power leaked out, which Michael happily absorbed with his battery. He was like one of those nurses in an operating table with a vacuum that sucked out all the blood to keep the surgery clean. Except, in this case, the blood he was getting was even more valuable than gold. Juniper whispered a few unintelligible words, casting her spells vocally. She began fighting through the ability power in Nixie's heart, fixing and mending the holes that were damaged throughout the process. Everything seemed to be going great, with Nixie's heartbeat slowly returning to normal. Even the ability power that was running amok started to taper off, with signs of slowly becoming weaker and weaker. However, at that moment Nixie's heart ceased. It stopped beating. "Damn it!" Juniper cursed. Her Tao heart is experiencing failure. "What was the cause of this?" Michael asked. "It's not us who did this. It's Nixie herself. She is subconsciously rejecting the healing that I've been giving her Tao heart. Because of all the pain and suffering she'd experienced, she now wants to get rid of her own Tao heart." Reed and his wife held hands. "Don't give up, Nixie. We're here for you." "Miss Juniper, what can we do?" After going this far, he didn't want all their efforts to suddenly be in vain. Nixie was still a child, and there was still a chance for her to live a normal life. If she could just recover, then he could show her that her Tao heart could be healed from the curse. "We'll have to go in there," Juniper said with determination. "Go where?" he asked. "Inside her Tao heart. Inside the very void of her soul. That's where we can find Nixie's subconscious. It's the only way that we can convince her that we're helping her." As soon as Theodora heard this, she immediately objected. "Going into a person's subconscious void? It's extremely dangerous, even more so when going alone." "I'll go with you." Juniper shook her head. "Your cultivation is too strong and may create an adverse reaction from Nixie. But, I can do it alone. It's the only way that we can save her. And we have to save her," Juniper declared. And just as Juniper was about to step forward, Michael volunteered himself. "I'm going with you," he said. "You'll need someone to absorb the rampaging ability power in her Tao heart." Juniper looked at him, her face serious to convey the severity and danger of the situation. Entering the subconscious void of a person is a dangerous tightrope. It's not just our bodies that are going inside, it's our souls as well. One wrong move, and you can get lost within the chasm of her own mind, never getting out. But despite her warnings, Michael didn't back down. "You won't change my mind," he affirmed. Reed and his wife were incredibly moved with Michael's actions. "Thank you," Reed said to Michael. "Even though we don't know each other, you're already risking your life to save my daughter. Thank you." "Kukuku. Dangerous? The void is my playground," Harbinger cackled. "But it's good that they think so. They'll be more indebted to you, and you can earn $10 to fund our cultivation." Harbinger being so confident in this endeavor was definitely easing his worries. But he would have still gone through with it even if Harbinger wasn't here with him. Juniper then looked at him, giving him one last chance to back out. "Are you ready?" "I am." Juniper began counting on his fingers before eventually jumping inside Nixie's Tao heart. Her entire body got sucked inside the open heart, allowing her to go directly into Nixie's subconscious. Michael jumped after her. He felt himself get smaller and smaller until he felt like he was falling into a giant white abyss that blinded him for a few seconds. The only thing he could see or hear was the sound of Harbinger cackling with excitement. A few seconds later, his momentum stopped, He opened his eyes and saw himself in a completely different environment. He wasn't in a different room or in a different city. He was underwater, and judging from the fact that there was just an endless abyss of a dark blue ocean everywhere he looked, then he could safely assume that he was probably thousands of meters below sea level. Thankfully, it seemed that this place didn't follow the laws of physics at all, since he could still breathe normally underwater. "You made it." He turned around and saw Juniper floating behind him. She, too, was breathing normally in the ocean, as if they had become a part of the merman species. The subconscious void of a person is a representation of their very souls. It's their fears, their ambitions, and their excitements. It is everything that makes a person, a person. Usually, someone's subconscious void shows everything that they want or need in life. A mountain of gold, plentiful harvest, etc. As for Nixie, her subconscious features the deep ocean. She has lived her whole life underwater, but was unable to explore it fully because of her curse. That's why the ocean around us looks bleak, featureless, and endless. We need to find her and show her that life is still well worth living. They were supposed to find Nixie in her subconscious, but everywhere Michael looked, he could only see nothing but an endless ocean. Where? His words were interrupted as he saw something dark on the corner of his eyes. He turned around, his eyes widening as his gaze sized up the monstrous shape in front of him. Chapter 657. Sea Monster. A colossal creature larger than imagination stood in front of him. Its two squid-like eyes made the dark blue ocean glow with a tint of red. Multiple skyscraper-sized tentacles squirmed around its mouth, seemingly searching for its next prey to consume. Attached on its back were a pair of bat-like wings, which looked like it could help the creature move at tremendously fast speeds despite its size. He looked down and saw that its body extended down into the dark abyss. What he was looking at was merely the top of its head. He couldn't even see its shoulders. "Cthulhu," Juniper muttered with fear. "We're lucky that it's just a representation of its body, or else we'll have already been dead meat." He mirrored her apprehension. He felt like he was the size of an ant, looking up at a planet gazing down at him. Why would Nixie have the most terrifying sea creature in the world in her subconscious? He asked her. Juniper stayed silent for a second. "I don't know, but it's irregular. We'll have to investigate closer to find out more." Thankfully, Cthulhu was just standing there, doing nothing. It made it easier for them to approach this legendary creature without having to worry about whether it would devour them or not. Now what? Where would we find Nixie? Juniper stared at Cthulhu, peering through the giant tentacles and into its mouth. "She's inside there." "She's inside Tulu?" "Yes, that's where we'll find her subconscious." Upon closer inspection, he could feel ability power emanating from Cthulhu's mouth. Juniper was right. Nixie's subconscious was hiding inside Cthulhu itself. They both swarmed forward, and as they got closer, Michael was able to comprehend the sheer size and magnitude of the creature in front of him. Just the tentacles themselves were bigger and taller than the skyscrapers in his world. As they got closer, they saw mountain-like teeth around Cthulhu's jaws, with its edge pointed straight towards them. "Just don't wander off," Juniper warned him. Of course, he had no intention of having a stroll around Cthulhu's mouth. Entering its body was already adventurous enough. And as they got closer to the mouth of the beast, they suddenly felt the water in front of them rush forward like a river. Both him and Juniper were swept inside Cthulhu's mouth, giving them no time to think about backing out. With just pure darkness around him, he found comfort in the batteries on his heart. Eventually, they saw a tinge of light in the distance. His eyes widened as he saw an entirely new world populated with biofluorescent creatures swimming around them. Fishes glowing with rainbow colors swarm in schools. Squid-like creatures with pulsating lights curiously swam up towards them, and even the corals decorated around them were glowing with neon colors. He thought that this was an amazing sight that was a great contrast to Cthulhu's terrifying presence. However, it wasn't long before they felt a rumbling around them. What was that? The colorful fishes, which used to be so energetic, suddenly swam away in fear. The squids squirted out black ink before dashing away in a flash. Every single biofluorescent creature fled for their lives. Michael and Juniper turned around, and in the darkness, they could see the walls of Cthulhu's body trembling. Then, they saw an outline of a large snake creature with black and white scales. Its face bore a close resemblance to dragons, while its body was that of an eel. It had its jaws unclenched, ready to devour everything in its sight. It swam towards them, bumping into the fleshy walls of Cthulhu's body in a hurry. "The Leviathan?" Juniper exclaimed. It seemed that another colossal sea creature had manifested into Nixie's subconscious void. Unfortunately, unlike Cthulhu, this one looked alive enough to be hungry. "We have to go," Juniper said, swimming as fast as she could away from the Leviathan. He quickly followed behind her. Thankfully, the flow of water worked in their direction, pushing them away from the Leviathan and neglecting the speed difference in water between them. However, this seemed to have worked for the Leviathan as well. It started gaining on them, inching closer and closer to their feet. With its jaws wide open, it was ready to devour them whole. "There," Juniper said, seeing a small diversion to the side, just enough for them to pass through. Without thinking about it, they pushed their bodies to the right, fitting perfectly into the small hole just in time as Leviathan's jaws clenched shut towards them. The whole chamber trembled as Leviathan tried to enter the hole. It thrashed around, angry, but was not able to destroy the fleshy linings of Cthulhu's body. For now they were safe. "That was close," he muttered. But just then, they suddenly felt the current start to pick up with more and more intensity, pushing them around into a circle. And at the center of this current was a whirlpool that seemed to go down straight into a dark abyss. "Swim against it," Juniper said, trying to get out of the whirlpool that trapped them. He swam with her, using all of his might to thrash the water around and free himself from the flow of the current. Eventually, they found themselves in the still part of the water. The whirlpool didn't have any flow of current here, making them safe. But just as they were about to get their bearings, the entire chamber shook once again as the Leviathan seemed to have finally broken through the flesh walls of Cthulhu's body. It roared, sending a shockwave throughout the water. Then it turned towards them, with its red eyes keen on finally catching its prey. "We're trapped," Juniper said as she looked forward and saw nothing but a dead end. They had nowhere else to go. They had been cornered by the Leviathan. "We have to go into the whirlpool," he said to her. He noticed that the whirlpool wasn't just a place where it drew water in. It was also the place where all the surge of ability power was coming from. They would no doubt find Nixie there on the other side. Juniper looked at Michael and nodded. Even though they'd only just met today, she was already trusting his decisions. He had already proven himself multiple times before. "Okay, but we have to go now," she said. They jumped back into the whirlpool at the same time, dodging the Leviathan's lunge. It collided into the wall, disorienting it for a brief second. And while Michael and Juniper rotated around the whirlpool, the Leviathan finally got its bearings. And without hesitation, it swam towards them and into the whirlpool. "Swim to the center," he said to Juniper. They both began swimming directly into the eye of the whirlpool, speeding up their descent into the hole. It wasn't long before they plunged into the dark abyss, with Michael dodging the Leviathan's sharp teeth by a hair width. It angrily thrashed around, angry that it couldn't capture its prey. This time it had finally given up. Meanwhile, Michael and Juniper both fell into the abyss, with the stream of water pushing them down like a waterfall. Eventually, they landed on the bottom of the abyss, where the waters were as calm and serene as could be. And right in front of them, they saw Nixie, sitting inside a giant clam shell. Chapter 658. Coming out of the shell. Little Nixie was sitting inside the clamshell, with what seemed like action figure toys of sea monsters surrounding her. She had a miniaturized version of Cthulhu in one hand, and the Leviathan in the other. She was playing with them, propping them up and making it seem as if they were interacting with each other. She was so focused on playing her game that she didn't even seem to notice their presence at all. "Nixie," Juniper called out as she carefully approached the little mermaid. But still, Nixie ignored her. She kept on playing with her toys. "We're here to help you. Why don't you come out with us and we can talk?" she said to Nixie. This time, Nixie finally reacted. She stopped playing with her toys but kept her gaze down. "I don't want to," she muttered. Juniper pursed her lips. "I see now why her Tao heart deteriorated to this state. It's because she has chosen to live in her own subconscious and refused to experience the real world." Nixie's real life was bland. With the curse of her Tao heart, she was unable to do things that normal merman children would do. While everyone rode on manta rays for school, she remained at home, unable to even leave her coral bed. While everyone swam through the 7 seas for a trip, she remained at their home, with no friends to accompany her. The worst part was that even through all the sacrifices, she would still end up dying because of her curse. Compared to that, her subconscious was filled with excitement and adventure. She had Cthulhu and the Leviathan by her side, keeping her company and making sure that she was never lonely again. And in this place, she could move, swim, and fly as she liked without her heart hurting at every movement. She would rather spend her time here than live in the real world. However, by choosing to live in her subconscious, she was only further dooming her Tao heart into failure. Even now, when Juniper had fixed the strain of her Tao heart, Nixie was choosing to let it fail. After all, even if she survived today, it would only delay the inevitable. The curse would still linger in her Tao heart, destroying her body again and again and again. In her mind, there was no point in trying to fix what was unfixable. "Nixie, honey, you can't stay here forever. You have to wake up. Your parents are waiting for you," Juniper said, approaching her. "No!" Nixie screamed. Juniper took a step back, respecting her wishes. "She is adamant in staying, and that's bad for all of us," she said to Michael. "We have no choice but to force her out of this place. We have to get her out of Cthulhu's body." "Okay, how are we going to do that?" he asked her. "Taking her is easy. It's what comes after that's hard. Her whole subconscious will fight against us," she warned. "I have about 350% charge left on my batteries. That's good enough for one quantum slash and a quantum step." Thankfully, he absorbed a lot of AP from Nixie's awakening. If he hadn't, then he wouldn't be as confident doing this mission. "I'm ready," he said to her. Once again, Juniper counted with her fingers before lunging towards Nixie, grabbing her tightly. "Kya!" Nixie screamed, with the whole subconscious void trembling with her voice. But no matter how much Nixie tried to squirm out, Juniper had a firm grip on her waist. "Let's go," she said, jumping out and back into the hole they came from. Michael followed suit, swimming up and eventually emerging from the whirlpool's spout. Suddenly, the despondent Leviathan reared its head up, surprised at his prey's sudden reappearance. Juniper quickly swam through the waters, getting out of the raging currents before the Leviathan could get to them. With the monster hot on their trail, they eventually reached the hole they diverged into and squeezed past its cavity. The Leviathan charged head first into the hole, using its dragon-like spiky scales to pierce through the very lining of Cthulhu's body. And this time it seemed to have been able to burst through. It seemed that the disturbance in the subconscious void caused by Nixie's distress weakened the structure of Cthulhu's body enough for the Leviathan to break through. Not only that, but Michael and Juniper were now swimming back up Cthulhu's body, fighting against the current and slowing them down. Eventually, the Leviathan finally caught up to them. With its jaws open wide, it could swallow an entire city completely. Michael and Juniper were easy prey. "We're close to the exit." Juniper's words trailed off when she saw Michael slowing down his ascent. "What are you doing?" she asked him. She could see the Leviathan going straight for him. "You guys go ahead," he replied to her. "I'll slow it down." Juniper was speechless. The Leviathan would have most certainly caught up to the both of them. There was no doubt about it. So if Michael hadn't sacrificed himself and made himself bait, then Juniper wouldn't be able to take Nixie out of Cthulhu's body. However, this would almost certainly spell certain doom for Michael. He was facing a legendary monster of the ocean. Even if this was just a representation made by Nixie's subconscious, Its strength still far exceeded Michael's strength. Heck, he wouldn't be able to fight against it even if he was a 9th-stage magnetic. Michael didn't seem to care about any of this and came to a standstill as he waited for the Leviathan to come closer enough near him. Then, he took out his switch and manifested his Unity Saber. As the Leviathan closed its jaws to tear him in half, he activated his batteries, allowing him to gather enormous amounts of ability power in his wrists. Space began to warp around his hands as he grabbed the very fabric of reality in front of him and forcefully transported him into another location. Juniper saw Michael's body completely disappear from her sight, surprising her. It took a few moments for her to realize where he had gone off to. She looked up at the Leviathan's head and saw Michael in between its eyes, with his strange weapon in both hands. More and more ability power poured out of Michael's batteries, basically draining it of energy. With 300% charge in his hands, the reality-bending power extended up to his Unity Saber, allowing it to tear space apart and create an accretion effect around it. He swung his blade, letting a crescent of torn space to launch towards the Leviathan's head. His quantum slash collided against the Leviathan's head, quickly tearing the scales off its skin. The Leviathan recoiled in pain, receding back into the darkness. Juniper couldn't believe her eyes. Somehow, for those brief moments, Michael was able to exhibit a strength above his own stage, above his own realm. Those were techniques that only nascent spirit realm cultivators could achieve. Impossible. Who is he? Aerith already told her about his impossible feat of defeating Alaric and Potbowl. But it was only now did Juniper finally believe those words. Chapter 659. Exit Rift. Juniper couldn't help but stare at Michael in wonder. She wanted nothing more than to question him about his incredible and unexplainable strength. But she knew that this was not the time. Nixie was starting to feel drowsy again. She was no longer wrestling out of Juniper's grasp. This was all due to the fact that they forcefully pulled her out of her subconscious. This made her active and conscious self to awaken, causing her to become the same despondent person as she was in reality. Just then, the whole subconscious void started to tremble yet again. But this time, the magnitude was a lot stronger than before. They could feel their bodies starting to rip apart just from the shaking of the sea. "We have to get out of the subconscious void now," Juniper said. "She's starting to wake up. And if she does, we won't be able to get out." Thankfully, with the Leviathan out of the equation, Juniper and Michael could finally exit Cthulhu's body. They floated out of the dark abyss and saw the endless dark blue ocean in front of them. They continued to swim forwards until they felt movement behind them. They turned around, only to see Cthulhu's eyes moving around before settling in their direction. Its two giant wings started to flap, causing its entire body to move forward and catch up to Michael and Juniper in an instant. "Damn! Even Cthulhu's coming after us. I don't have any more AP in my battery." "It's not going to attack you," Harbinger said. And before he could question him, Cthulhu suddenly opened its mouth and sent a shockwave that traveled towards them at the speed of sound. "I mean no harm," Cthulhu said, with its voice low and with an echo. "I want only to express my greatest thanks to you for saving her." Cthulhu's red eyes softened as it gazed at the unconscious Nixie. Juniper stopped in her tracks, unable to comprehend what she just heard. That's not possible. Her consciousness is supposed to take over now. With Nixie already well on her way to activating her conscious mind, everything in this subconscious void should start to become inactive as a result. However, this representation of Cthulhu seemed to have only gained movement right after Nixie got out of her subconscious. Not only that, but it gained the capacity to speak as well. That was impossible. Unless it's not a representation. It's the real deal. Juniper could only gasp at the realization she had just made. This Cthulhu wasn't a figment of Nixie's imagination. It was actually Cthulhu itself, or at least a part of its soul. That was the only way to explain it. Juniper couldn't believe that one of the most ancient, most powerful sea monsters in the entire world would lend a part of its soul to a mermaid child's subconscious void. Not only that, it seemed to care for her as if it was its child. Wait, does she have an extraordinary blessing? The power that she was awakening was one that could control or communicate with sea creatures. It all made sense. Back when the Leviathan was hunting them down, it wasn't because it wanted to eat them. It wanted to protect Nixie, and it tried to catch them because Nixie wanted to return to her shell. That was how brought Cthulhu itself into her subconscious void. What's an extraordinary blessing? Michael asked. It's the equivalent of having a SSS-class talent, she replied. It's one of the most extreme and fruitful awakenings that a beast folk can have. Juniper could only lament the fact that despite having such a wonderful blessing, Nixie was still being plagued with the curse. If her life wasn't limited by the weakness of her own Tao heart, she could become one of the most powerful mermaids in the entire world. But there was no time to think about that. They had to get out of the subconscious void. She looked around, eventually finding a glowing white rift in the water. That was their exit. She quickly turned around to inform Michael, but saw him just staring blankly at Cthulhu. "You are different," Cthulhu muttered. The fact that such an ancient being like Cthulhu would even deign to talk to Michael only proved the fact that the boy was extraordinarily different from others. But then, she saw something she never thought would happen in her entire life. Cthulhu bowed its head at Michael. "I treat your power with esteem," Cthulhu bellowed. And before Juniper could even react, the trembling of the subconscious void got more intense, with ocean water itself starting to break apart. It won't be long before they'd get crushed under the weight of this void and become forever lost in its space. Not only that, but the exit rift was slowly closing. Cthulhu's tentacles whipped forward, creating a large stream of water that pushed Juniper and Nixie into the glowing white rift. The only one left behind was Michael and Cthulhu. "Kukuku. At least he knows his place," Harbinger said.
Ikan sensayo.
"Of course. I'm always stronger in a subconscious mind. He can feel it." Cthulhu gazed at him, its eyes seemingly peering down into the depths of his soul. "Human, I request for you to save that child. She is of weak body but with a strong mind. She does not deserve a life cut short." He could sense emotion within Cthulhu that almost seemed human. "You care for her?" "I do. Ever since she summoned a part of my consciousness in this void, I have kept her company and she has kept mine. We have bonded, and I now treat her as if she was my own brood." He wouldn't have expected to hear that from a creature like Cthulhu. After all, it was always depicted as the pinnacle of Lovecraftian horror, not as the sentimental and misunderstood being that it was now. "I'll try my best to save her," he promised. "That is acceptable," Cthulhu said. "To express my gratitude, I leave you with this gift. Treasure it." Cthulhu's tentacles started to squirm. It converged into one point, with all of its ends starting to glow with a white light. Then suddenly, particles started to manifest in front of Cthulhu, forming to take the shape of a sphere. It wasn't long before an iridescent pearl formed in front of Cthulhu. With a simple nudge from its tentacles, the pearl moved towards Michael. And as it got closer to him, he finally realized the true size of his gift. The pearl was as big as he was. He touched the pearl and tried to move it, only to realize that it was extremely heavy. Even in the weightlessness of water, he found it extremely hard to push forwards. "What is this?" he asked Cthulhu. But instead of answering, Cthulhu shot a stream of water towards Michael, pushing him into the glowing white rift just before it closed completely. Michael landed on his feet, now back in the surgery room with everyone looking at him. "What happened?" Juniper asked him. "I don't know," he said truthfully. He really didn't know why Cthulhu gave him a giant pearl. Still, he made sure to store it in his drone's pocket dimension for now so that it was out of sight, out of mind. Chapter 660. Shedding. Once they were out of the subconscious void, Juniper immediately went to continue her surgery on Nixie's heart. A couple of minutes later, she made the final stitches on the Tao heart, mending the cut that leaked out ability power everywhere. And finally, the room went silent. There was no chaos, no rampaging ability power, and no more distressed look on Nixie's face. She seemed to finally be sleeping peacefully for the first time in a few weeks. "What happened out there?" Reed asked, hugging his wife in anxiousness. Did you save her? Juniper nodded. Yes, we did. We have successfully pulled Nixie out of her subconscious void, allowing her Tao heart to recover normally. Reed and his wife felt their legs turn to jelly out of relief. It was as if a giant mountain was lifted off their shoulders. Thank you. Thank you. He grabbed Juniper's hands and kneeled in front of her. It's not just me you should thank. I couldn't have done it without him, Juniper said, pointing to Michael. She could still vividly remember the scene in which he clashed against the Leviathan, using a strength that was above his own realm. It was unreal. She was starting to wonder why Michael was still unknown in the greater part of Metropolis when he was already so talented that he could arguably put head-to-head against so-called geniuses. Thankfully, though, it seemed that someone finally appreciated Michael's talents. Reed went over to Michael and clasped his hands. You have made a friend in me, he said. I genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart. Michael awkwardly accepted the compliment even though he knew that Juniper did most of the work. All he did was support her a few times. Although the mood inside the room was hopeful, there was still a lingering sense of sadness in Juniper. The senior apothecary approached Nixie's parents and had a talk with them face to face. Listen, I will give it to you straight. We saved Nixie's life today. But that doesn't mean that she has been completely cured of her disease. Since we forcefully pulled her out of her subconscious void, Nixie will become even more lethargic than before. She'll refuse to do anything, eat, sleep, and move. Her road to recovery is incredibly steep, which means that you'll have to be with her every step of the way. You have to keep constantly trying to awaken her out of this near catatonic state, or else her Tao heart will continue degrading, leading to another dangerous incident such as today. Reed and his wife held each other for emotional support. Even though they just passed through a difficult hurdle, more and more hurdles appeared on their way. Is there no way to save her? No way to let her live a normal life? Reed asked. Juniper wanted to say yes and keep their hopes up, but she knew that she'd be lying if she said it. Unless we can get rid of the curse in her Tao heart, then her situation will not get better. It will get worse, and there is nothing that we can do about it. Nixie's parents stifled a cry. Just then, Michael raised his hand and got everyone's attention. Nixie needs to stimulate her Tao heart to keep the curse at bay. Correct? Juniper nodded. Then wait for me for a few days. I think I can do something, he said. And before anyone could ask questions, he teleported out of the room and back into the nation of Reborn. He landed in the middle of the desert, with a large patch of the ground in front of him. They had already dug deep to build the roller coaster's foundations. He then saw Kong and the rest of the Rebornian Imagineers working hard to plan and conduct the construction project with the best quality and efficiency that they could afford. Kong, listen, have you guys settled on a design for the thrilling roller coaster as of yet? The group of yellow Hobmanki engineers shook their heads, embarrassed. I'm sorry, boss, but we can't settle on a design just yet. We know nothing about the Merman Society, so we don't know which design would give the best results. He looked at them with a smile. Well, I've got the solution for you. Here's my plan. He began telling them about his experience in the subconscious void, entering Cthulhu's mouth and being chased by the Leviathan with nothing but the darkest shadows around to accompany them. ChatJK5 even stepped in and gave them a first-person perspective view on Michael's memory, allowing them to feel, hear, and experience the thrilling moment that he entered into the mouth of the colossal ocean monster. About 10 minutes later, Kong and the engineers were lit afire with inspiration. It's the perfect way to create a thrilling ride that brings fear and excitement to mermen, Kong praised. We shall start out designs as you have said, boss. It had already been proven that mermen feared the monsters under the depths, including the most ancient of them all, Cthulhu. And if they started the roller coaster ride the same way their journey started, then the mermen would immediately feel intimidated by sheer instinctual fear they had of being consumed by Cthulhu. During the ride itself, they would be chased by the Leviathan nonstop, just like what happened to them in the void. And to do that, they needed to build the biggest structure they'd ever built, one that could be seen even far off from a distance. Of course, the inside should be expansive as well. It had to be immersive, one that would make its riders feel as if they were transported into the deepest depths of the ocean. And as for its animatronics, he couldn't simply use robots with painted costumes. He had to borrow from the real thing. He had to make them from real sea monsters. He immediately transported himself back into the fishing village, finding Quint back in his tackle shop. The old man seemed to be very happy seeing his face and immediately bragged to him about his exploits these past few days. "You won't believe what happened to me, young fella. At the start, I had an incredibly hard time finding any suitable sea monsters to present to you. However, just a few hours ago, these perfectly preserved carcasses suddenly floated up from the depths of the ocean." Quint led Michael to the back of the shop, unveiling the large cover to reveal a snake-like creature curled up dead. His eyes widened as he realized that the sea creature looked very familiar. Its dragon-like face and its eel-like body reminded him of none other than the Leviathan back in the void. This is not the Leviathan, but its weaker, younger cousin. Still, they're from the same lineage, so you can still see the resemblance. Michael was incredibly pleased with this. This perfectly preserved carcass was the perfect size to use in the ride. "And that's not all, look at this," Quint said, removing another large cover on the ground. He revealed what seemed to be a shed skin of a gigantic octopus limb. "My first thought was that this was one of Cthulhu's tentacles. But that's impossible. So, this is probably just another sea creature in the depths that has giant limbs."